bride of the cursed Alpha. The road to Moonstone Hall smelled like old smoke and wet stone. Charred stumps rose like broken knuckles from the fields, and ash lifted in sheets when the wind rolled across the flats. Seraphina sat opposite her father in the carriage, fingers laced in her lap so tightly, her knuckles ached. The ceremonial omega white gown scratched at her collarbone. A thin chain circled her throat, a pretty pretense for a leash. Alpha Velahart watched her without looking at her, eyes on the curtained window as the lamps outside flickered past. The scar beside his mouth pulled tight when the wheels jolted into a rut. "You will not embarrass me," he said at last. "By breathing, speaking, or existing?" she asked. She kept her tone as mild as a winter sky. "By forgetting your role." "My role," she said, "is to be quiet while men discuss what my body is worth." "Enough." His voice hit the carriage wall and came back thinner. "Peace has a price. Your name will keep our borders from bleeding." She turned her face to the glass. Moonstone Hall rose ahead, ribs of dark stone against a bruised horizon. Once it had held dances and harvest feasts. Now torches hissed in iron cages along the steps, and the banners above the entry were smoke-stained and colorless. Soldiers moved with the heavy care of men who slept in their boots. The door opened. Cold air slid in under the hem of her gown. For a heartbeat, something turned under her ribs. Not thought, not voice. Just the slow, drowsy shift of a creature asleep in deep water. She held still, and it sank again. She took the step down on her own. Arendor Vane met them at the top of the stairs, broad-shouldered, a pale scar cutting his beard. His gaze went first to Torek, measuring, then to Seraphina. Surprise flickered once, there and gone. "Alpha Torek," he said. He didn't bow. "You kept us waiting." "We are here," Torek said. "That is enough." Arendor's attention returned to Seraphina for a breath. "Lady," he said, the word a courtesy cut to regulation, and turned to lead them inside. The great hall smelled of damp stone and old smoke. Fire baskets tossed light up the pillars. A long table divided the room, set with pewter and bread and meat going slick with cooling fat. Above the high seat, the ceiling opened to the sky where a window had shattered years ago. The moon showed through the ragged circle, tinted red by ash in the air. Conversation thinned as they entered. Seraphina felt the weight of eyes touch her gown, her throat, the line of her braid. She let her face go quiet, the way she had practiced as a girl when servants carried gossip past her as if she were furniture. The air shifted. Stillness radiated from the shadow under the broken window, as if winter had stepped into the room and the fire had chosen not to argue. He came forward without hurry. Coal-black hair lay loose to his shoulders. His skin held an ashen pallor that looked like it had soaked into him the way smoke soaks into walls. Pale bands ringed his forearms, thin and thick, old and newer, a history written by light. His eyes were silver with fine threads of gold. Cold coins at the bottom of a river. He didn't announce himself. He was announced by the way the hall leaned toward him. Raven Duskbane looked at Torek first. They regarded each other like two men remembering the same story from different sides. "Alpha Torek," Raven said. He didn't raise his voice. "Raven," Torek answered. Raven's mouth moved. Not quite a smile. He turned to Seraphina. The attention felt like a hand closing. He took her in as if he'd been sent a map and was checking it against the terrain. "Bride?" he said. "Alpha," she said, and her voice did not shake. A woman stepped out from the shadow near the high seat. Her gown was the dark red of dried poppies, braided hair the color of embers. She considered Seraphina with interest that warmed nothing. "Lady Calith," Arendor said. Calith skimmed her gaze over Seraphina as a seamstress might inspect a bolt of cloth. Then she crossed to Raven's left and took her place at the head of the table, spine straight, hands relaxed. The jewels at her throat looked like drops of blood that had learned to gleam. Raven gestured to the chair at his right. He didn't say sit. He had no need. Seraphina lowered herself without letting her shoulders fold. Torek sat opposite. Arendor stood at Raven's shoulder. Servants came, moving quiet as thoughts no one wanted to admit to. "To peace," Torek said. "May it hold." Raven filled his own cup and then Serena's. He made her wait with the wine in her hand until his gaze found hers again. "To what is taken and kept," he said, and drank. Serenia tasted the wine. Spices hid thinness. Heat washed her throat, pooled behind her tongue. She set it down. Caleth's voice slid across the table like silk drawn over a blade. "It is generous to break bread with men whose shadows burned our valleys. Or practical. I confuse the two." "Practical," Torek said. "Generosity dries up in a famine." Caleth's smile didn't move past her mouth. "And yet," she said, eyes sliding to Serenia, "some things are still plentiful." Serenia met her look. "I wouldn't know," she said. "I've been kept on short rations of honesty." Raven's knife traced a line through meat and stopped. He set it down and reached across the narrow space. His fingers closed around Serenia's wrist. The hall's sound narrowed to a thread. His grip wasn't rough, it didn't have to be. Cool skin, hard bones. The touch burned in a way that felt like light pouring through a crack, a clean heat that moved up her arm and settled in her shoulder. She didn't pull away. She would not give him that small victory. Torek's chair creaked. "Serenia," he said without looking up, warning a child at a fire. She looked at Raven. The gold in his eyes caught and held a spark from the nearest basket. His thumb found the beat in her wrist and pressed, measuring the tempo like a musician, marking time. "Do you always touch what you want in public?" she asked, "or only when you're afraid it will run?" A soft laugh moved along the benches and died. Arendor's gaze sharpened. Caleth's eyes warmed as a cat's might when the mouse spoke. "Only when it is mine," Raven said. The burn unwound to the base of her throat, pulsed once and faded to a thin line of heat. Under her ribs, something turned again. No voice, no words, just the sensation of a sleeper shifting closer to the surface before sinking back. She slid her hand free. He let her. That was worse than having to fight for it. Patrols and supply lines took the table next, moved like stones across a map. Who commanded the South Ridge? Which ravines were off limits? Where grain would travel now that winter had bitten deeper than expected? Serenia listened because listening cost less than speaking here. She watched Raven's forearms when he pushed his sleeves up, the pale bands the sun had carved there. Sunlight didn't mark most men with writing you could read from across a room. "What does it feel like?" she said before she could leash the question. "The sun, on your skin." The pause that followed had a different shape than the others. Caleth went still. Arendor's jaw set. Raven turned his head. Like truth told without mercy. "And at night," she said, "what does that feel like?" He held her gaze. "Like a lie I can live inside." Something in his eyes changed. Not softer. Clearer, for a breath. Then the room remembered to breathe, and Arendor leaned in, voice pitched low. "The altar is ready." Torek stood. "Then let this be finished." Caleth smoothed her skirt and fell in on Raven's left. Arendor took up his station behind. Raven didn't offer Serenia his hand. He set a pace that made offering unnecessary. The hall moved with them, torches hissing, shadows bending. The broken circle in the ceiling holding the moon like a coin balanced on a fingertip. At the door, Caleth glanced sideways. "You could still run," she said, almost conversational. "The Ashfields do not care who they eat." Serenia kept walking. "I'm tired of being found." Caleth's mouth tilted, not approval, interest. "Then be difficult to keep." Cold took her face at the threshold. Outside, torches marked a path to a low altar of cracked white stone. The packs formed living walls, leather whispering, boots scuffing. Serenia recognized faces from old market days and border quarrels. Others were strangers who would repeat her name tonight like a new coin, testing its weight. Raven stopped at the altar and turned. The world shrank to the space between his body and hers. "Say your name," he said, "Serenia Valahart. Say mine. Raven Duskbane." The sound of it in her mouth changed the air. He lifted a hand to her hair and paused, as if reminding himself that he could withhold gentleness, even when offering it would cost him nothing. He moved the stray strand back from her cheek. His fingers were careful. Careful wasn't kind. Arendor's voice carried without strain. Before the moon, before the blood that made us wolves. Witness. Raven did not look away from Serenia. I take you, he said. He didn't dress the words in ceremony. He set them down like iron. The answers she had been taught stuck like old bread. Her mind offered her a line of pretty lies. She left them where they lay. I stand, she said. It was the only truth she owned tonight. I stand. His hand settled at the nape of her neck, weight and claim. The other found her shoulder. The pack's breath drew in and held. The night pressed closer. He lowered his head, the brief gleam of a fang in the edge of her sight. Inside him, something rough and hot uncoiled. Draven slid closer to the surface of his thoughts, a familiar heat in the marrow. Now, the wolf urged, voice a rumble against bone. Take what is ours. Make the night smell like her. Not yet, Raven answered, even as his fingers tightened. He bent, and his breath warmed her skin. Serenia kept her spine unbent. She felt the edge of his mouth, the cool graze of his teeth before the bite. The world narrowed to the place where he would mark her, and the punch of her heart counting down. A small sound carried from the watching crowd, someone's choked sob, or a prayer pressed into a fist. Calith's hands folded tighter. Arendor shifted his weight, waiting for the moment to pass into the next. Raven's teeth skimmed her skin. The instant before puncture lived in her like a stretched string. Do it, Torek said, flat as a coin on a table. Raven's jaw flexed. Serenia's gaze found the ragged circle of sky above the hall behind them. The moon was a dull red, a witness too far to help. The sleeper under her ribs turned once, slow and heavy, and stilled. It was not awake. It knew. That was all. Raven's mouth opened at her throat. The night held its breath. The night didn't exhale until he did. His mouth found the hollow where her pulse beat, and the warning graze of fang turned into a bite, clean and sure. The kind of decision made by a man who doesn't revisit his choices. Pain struck bright and immediate, then uncoiled into heat that flooded her chest like a door opening onto fire. Serenia's breath hitched. The mark throbbed under his mouth in time with her heart. The air itself seemed richer, edged with metal, the background hiss of torches suddenly close, intimate, as if the night had leaned in to listen. He tasted frost and lightning and something older than hunger. Power threaded the blood on his tongue, not strength like a blow, but a charge that made his mouth feel alive and raw at once. Behind his eyes, Draven surged, pleased. More, the wolf urged, voice like a low growl dragged into words. Finish it. Take what binds. Raven lifted his head too quickly for instinct, just before compulsion became command. A dark line slid from the bite to the hollow at her collarbone. He watched it, because watching was safer than licking it away in front of 100 witnesses. The crowd's held breath rushed free. A murmur pulled through the bodies like wind through dry grass. Calith's fingers tightened on the edge of her shawl. Arendor's jaw flexed and eased, the coiled readiness in his shoulders unwinding by degrees. Serenia stood. Her legs remembered how. The heat in her skin didn't fade. It settled, a slow burn mapping itself along her ribs and shoulder blades. Sounds sharpened into separate threads. Leather creaked. A child's quick sob was swallowed by someone's palm. The scent of the hall broke into smoke, oil, steel, fear. Deep beneath all of it, the sleeper under her ribs rolled closer to the surface, not awake, but listening. As if the world had become interesting. Raven's breath touched the mark, cool against the hot pulse. You will learn to love your chains, he murmured, as if offering a promise instead of a threat. And you will learn what it costs to hold me, she said. Her voice wasn't steady, but it wasn't small. Arendor stepped forward. "Witnessed," he said, pitched low but carrying. "The moon keeps count." Raven's hand left her nape. The absence made her skin feel colder. He lifted his arm to his pack. The ashen wolves answered with a sound that started as a call and ended as a warning, not a full-throated howl on another alpha stones, but the shape of one. It vibrated in the altar, and in Serenya's new wound until her body wanted to answer without her choosing it. Torek didn't look at her. He gave Raven the short nod of a man closing a deal and already counting what he'd bought, then turned to his captains. Calith stepped close enough that her voice could slide into the small space between Bride and Alpha. "The first bite teaches humility," Calith said, eyes on the stain at Raven's mouth. "For the one who bleeds, and for the one who thinks taking is simple." "You sound practiced," Serenya said without looking at her. "Educated," Calith answered, a smile like the neat edge of a cut. "May your lessons be kinder than mine." Raven offered his hand. Not gentle, not rough. A gesture with teeth. Serenya let her fingers slide into his. Contact sent a quick, bright shiver up to the mark. A thin wire pulled taut and plucked. He felt it too. She saw the brief narrowing of his eyes, the gold in them brightening. "Walk," he said. They moved through the corridor of bodies. Torches spat. Leather whispered. Someone muttered a prayer. Serenya counted what she could control. The number of lamps to the door, the shape of cracks in the stone, so she would not count the eyes. Inside the hall again, the braziers threw up soft waves of heat that met the night air and made a damp that sat on skin. The broken circle overhead framed the moon like a coin in a thief's hand. Raven stopped beneath it and turned her to face him because he could. His fingers brushed the smear on her throat. Not tender, not cruel. Cataloging. "Say what you're thinking," he said. "If I tell you, you'll think you know me," she said, "and I prefer certainty." "That's a luxury," she said, "like daylight." Arendor took his place at Raven's shoulder, attention moving from the room to the mark to the door in a pattern learned by long years of keeping a man alive. "Alpha," he said, "the carriage is ready. If we leave now, we'll be under the cliffs before dawn." Raven didn't look away from Serenya when he answered, "We ride." Torek approached, stopping at the respectful distance of two men who refused to be respectful. "Keep your word," he said. "My roads stay clear of your curse. My grain leaves the valleys when promised." "You'll get what we agreed," Raven said. "If your men don't wander." "They won't," Torek said. He looked at Serenya then and managed only this. "Do not forget your name." "I won't," she said. She didn't waste a syllable hoping he would say something worth remembering. Calith's eyes met Serenya's over Torek's shoulder, bright and dry, the look of a woman who recognized a game and had already marked the places the board would break. She didn't speak. She tilted her head. Not farewell, not welcome. An acknowledgement that the night had shifted and they were both standing on the line. Raven's hand found the small of Serenya's back. He guided. The place he touched woke in a way she hated. The awareness helped when her gown snagged and tried to pull her off her feet. She didn't thank him for his steadiness. She kept walking. The carriage waited like a black beetle, lacquer shining in torchlight. Horses stamped and blew steam. The driver huddled in his cloak, gloved hands steady on the reins. Ashen guards flanked the wheels, their gray-black leathers swallowing light. Arendor opened the door. Raven climbed in first and turned his palm up. Serenya set her hand on his because refusing to touch him would be a lie about control she didn't have yet. He drew her inside with that precise steadiness that never felt like help, only fact. The door shut. Street noise dulled to wheels, hooves, the muffled call of the driver. The carriage smelled like oil and leather and cold metal. For a breath, they were only breath and the low creak of wood. Raven didn't lounge. He sat forward, forearms on his thighs, every line of him held like a strike waiting to happen. When the carriage lurched and her knee knocked his, the mark pulsed. a quick flare that made her breath catch. He didn't pretend not to notice. "The bond answers touch," he said. "It doesn't care if you approve." "Then it and I disagree." "I expected that," he said. He watched her hands where they rested in her lap. "Are you in pain?" "If I am, I won't tell you." "Wise," he said, without a slice of mockery. She looked out at the night cutting past the small window. The hall shrank to sparks, and then to nothing. The road turned rougher, the wheels thudding over stones. Each jolt lit a small spark in the new wound at her throat. Not agony. Awareness. "Tell me about your curse," she said. "Not the story you give pups. The one you lean on when you're angry." "We live in dusk or under stone," he said. "The sun burns. Not a saying. Not a poem. Skin peels. Eyes dry. The old wither fast if they're stubborn. We teach caution before we teach pride. We build when clouds come, run when they break. We don't pretend to be what we're not. That's the truth, I believe." "And the reason you keep in your mouth when the night is long," she pressed. He almost smiled. A wolf loved a fire more than his pack. He bargained where he shouldn't. The moon turned her face. The sun learned to hate us. We were born with ash in our blood and light as an enemy. It tells us what not to do. "And what is that?" "Love the wrong thing more than your own," he said. Draven stirred, amused. "Ask her what she loves." "Not yet," Raven told him. "You talk like a man who expects obedience because he can enforce it," Seraphina said. "I talk like a man who has learned what happens when people mistake kindness for safety. When you live under a sky that tries to kill you, gentleness becomes a luxury you can't spend." "You make it sound noble." "It's ugly and it works." The carriage hit a rut and pitched her forward. She caught herself a breath too late. Raven's hand found her shoulder. The contact sang up to the mark, a bright, cutting flicker that made her breath stutter and his jaw tighten. He let go slowly, easing the space between them back into the same careful distance as before. It felt colder when his palm left her. That annoyed her more than anything he'd said. Hooves moved alongside the window, mounted guards keeping pace. Arendor's profile passed in the lamplight, focused, steady. He looked in once, not to check on her precisely, but to check on the equation she had become. Then the road narrowed, and he signaled the driver onto a cleaner line of packed dirt. "You trust him," Seraphina said. "With what I can't afford to lose," Raven said. "And me?" She said, because if he was going to speak like that, she wouldn't pretend not to notice where he placed her. He didn't answer yes or no. He watched her with pupils blown wider in the carriage dim. "I intend to keep you," he said. "Trust will be a different conversation." "I intend to keep myself," she said. "Surrender won't be part of it." "Then we've both declared our intentions," he said. "What did you expect when you decided to take me?" she asked. "Obedience, tears, gratitude for the chance to live under rock." "Noise," he said. "Men who pretend they don't love noise always lie. And the way the bond would sharpen my choices. I expected that too." "Are you disappointed?" she asked. "No," he said. "I don't like easy." The road dipped. The wind shifted and brought a colder scent. Mineral, damp, the taste of stone. Seraphina leaned toward the window. The land had become a darker dark, the fields giving way to cliffbacks rising like sleeping beasts. Far up, small points of light pricked against the black. Lanterns hung from hooks, guard fires, windows cut into rock. "We live in there," he said, as if answering what her eyes asked. "In the cliff. Halls tunneled by men who were children when they learned stone from stone. The sky you see from inside is a borrowed one." "Does it make you angry?" she asked, and it makes me realistic. "And when realism fails?" "I allow myself anger," he said, briefly. The driver whistled twice, sharp signals. Arendor drew his horse alongside the door. Raven tapped twice on the roof and cracked it open enough to let the cold and the sound in. "Scouts at the ravine mouth," Arendor said. "Ours. They saw movement above the lower tunnel. Might be Veilheart boys posturing. Might be nothing. They won't try me tonight, Raven said, simple assessment. Double the outer flank, keep the pace. If they want a story, they can make one without dying for it. Arendor nodded. His gaze slid past Raven to Seraphina and returned, not unkind, not dismissive, just counting variables. He eased back. The door shut. Will your pack blame me if the sun touches you because of me? Seraphina asked. They'll blame me, he said. And you, she said. I don't waste blame on choices I make, he said, even when they burn. She couldn't file that under threat. It wasn't softness either. It was a small, flat truth he set down between them and left for her to weigh. A swing lamp flashed gold across the carriage, then swung away. The moment of light found the pale bands on his forearms where his sleeves had ridden up. Older scars smooth as rope, newer ones raised, angry. How many times? She asked quietly. I stopped counting, he said. Counting belongs to men who think numbers save them. How old were you the first time? Old enough to disobey, he said. And after. I showed every boy what the sun writes and told them my worst story. They listened until they didn't. They always try once. Did you? She asked. Twice, he said. Draven unrolled a flicker of memory through him. The crackle of skin, the taste of his own breath turned to dust and was gone. The road tipped toward the cliffs. Lanterns hung at uneven intervals, cutting thin slices into the dark. The horses' hooves clattered where stone took over from dirt. The driver eased them toward a tunnel mouth, black in a blacker face, like a sleeping thing waiting with its eyes open. You'll go through there, Raven said. Under stone. We'll walk the ridge for a span where the road narrows. There's a place where the wind finds us. You can breathe there. I can breathe here, she said, more defiance than fact. You are, he said. The carriage slowed as guards closed in. Arendor's call bounced off rock and came back double. Raven's hand went to the latch. He paused, measured her face like a map whose landmarks had just shifted, then opened the door. The cold bit hard, clean, and honest. Arendor's horse stood close, torch cupped, to keep it from the wind. We'll take the lower stair, he said. Ridge looks clear. The boys on the upper shelf decided they believed in ghosts. They should, Raven said. Arendor flicked a look into the carriage again, a quick check for blood, shock, trouble, and stepped back. Raven climbed down. He offered his hand. Seraphina ignored it and stepped to the ledge alone. The stone was wet and uneven under her thin shoes. She set her weight with care. The mark throbbed once, then settled. Not approval, not protest, just presence. Good footing, Arendor said, the barest shade of approval. Good ledge, she said. Raven came down after, close enough that she could feel the shape of him behind her without a lick of heat. Guards moved in single file, torches bobbing. The stair, cut down into dark. The lower hall waited under that, rooms and lamps and the life she had not chosen. She put her palm to the rock and took the first step. Draven pressed forward in Raven's mind, bright with interest. She will not break, the wolf said, satisfied. She will bite. Good, Raven answered, and they turned with the stair. Wind found them through a narrow cut and slid across Serena's face, damp and salt cold, traveling far to make itself known here. The mark warmed under it. She paused on a wider section and let the wind lift a loose strand from her braid. She didn't realize she'd closed her eyes until she opened them and saw Raven closer than she'd meant to allow, the gold in his eyes steady. Breathe, he said. I am, she said, and let the truth of it be small and real. Arendor waited at the bend below, torch low. He looked up and then away, giving the kind of privacy a soldier gives, acknowledging it exists and no more. Calith wasn't there. Her perfume felt like a memory the rock had already eaten. The stair delivered them into a long hall cut from the mountain's belly. Lamps burned in niches. Doorways opened into rooms that smelled of baking and wool and old spice. People moved in small groups. Some glanced away quickly. Others, watched openly, not hostile, not welcoming, measuring with the plain curiosity of those whose nights had just changed. Raven nodded to faces that met his eyes. The gestures were command and promise, and a ledger kept in bone. He didn't touch Seraphina again. He didn't have to. The mark beat like a second heart, and the line between them tugged as naturally as breath. At a crossing, a woman with flour up to her elbows paused, basket against her hip, mild eyes studying Seraphina's face the way one studies a new path cut through familiar ground. "Good night to you," she said. "And to you," Seraphina answered, surprised at her own voice sounding almost like herself for a heartbeat. The woman nodded once, satisfied, and moved on. The damp wasn't heavy. The air had a clean mineral edge the hall at Moonstone had never held. The sound of water somewhere down a side passage ticked like a clock without numbers. "This will be your passage," Raven said, "for now. Later, other halls. Later, cliff roads at dusk." "What happens now?" she asked. "You wash," he said. "You eat, you stand in a room that is yours because I say it is. You sleep if your mind lets you. You wake and begin to learn. And you. I do what men with power do when they've bound themselves to something larger than pride," he said. "I watch. I listen. I count the men who think I made a mistake." "Did you?" she asked. "Make a mistake?" "That is what I intend to find out," he said. They stopped at a door set flush into the rock, iron-banded, hinge-oiled to silence. Arendor lifted a hand. A boy slipped forward with a key and swung the door inward. The room glowed warm, a narrow bed against the far wall, a table with a basin and clean cloths, a rug thick enough to surprise feet after stone. A small opening high up breathed a thread of night air. It wasn't soft, but it wasn't cruel. Seraphina crossed the threshold and didn't go farther. The mark beat at her throat, an insistence without language. Raven stood in the doorway, presence filling the frame, Draven pressed close behind his eyes, curious. "You will have a guard," Raven said. "Not for you. For anyone who thinks tonight is a good night to prove a point they won't live to make." "I thought you don't waste blame on choices you make," she said. "I don't," he said. "I waste men who think the first night of peace is a good night to die." Arendor made a small sound that might in another life have been a laugh. "I'll set the rotation," he said. 2 at the door, 2 at the bend. Raven nodded but didn't move. The quiet in the doorway wasn't empty. It was full of things not said. Draven crowded his bones, amused. "Take her scent in, put it on the corners. Make this ours." "Not tonight," Raven told him. He'd said that twice already and knew he would say it again, because wanting was not the same as owning, not even for him. "You are not a prisoner," he said to her. "You are not free. Both can be true for a while." "Until when?" she asked. "Until one truth kills the other." "Which truth will you kill?" "The one that hurts you more," he said. It sounded too simple and too dangerous at once. She held his gaze because she had held it all night and she was not going to be the one to look away first. "You keep telling me I'll change everything," she said. "You say it like a threat and a promise." "It is both," he said. "You don't even know me," she said. "I know enough," he said. "And what I don't know, I intend to learn." The air between them tightened and thinned, the mark pulsing in time with something she couldn't name. She did not step back. He did not step forward. Arendor's presence in the hall behind him was a steady weight, the kind that keeps a man from jumping when the ground invites him. "Rest," Raven said at last. "If I can," she said. "If you can," he echoed. He turned. Arendor followed. The door shut without a thud. Stone took back the space they left behind. Seraphina stood for a long breath, then crossed to the table. She poured water into the basin and watched the thin line at her throat fade under the cloth. Heat flared and cooled as she pressed it. The skin already looked different, no angry red, no raised welt, just an undeniable mark, new as a promise and as heavy. In the water's reflection, her face wavered, the lamplight turning her eyes oddly bright. She waited for the voice under her ribs to speak. It didn't. It had come near to feel the bite, then sank again, sleeping in a current she didn't yet know how to read. Outside her door, Boots passed and passed again. A low exchange. Arendor setting watches in a tone that said he expected to be obeyed and was used to being right. Somewhere in the stone, water clicked and fell. The room breathed warm air up from the rug and cooled down from the high cut in the wall, where a thread of night slid through. She lay down without undressing. She kept her eyes open until they closed by themselves, and when sleep took her, it took her like the cliff had taken them, without drama, with finality. The last thing she saw before the dark rolled over her was the way Raven had looked at her when he said you were going to change everything. Not triumphant, not afraid. A man who had felt the ground shift under his feet and decided to stand anyway. Sleep didn't last. Serenia woke to heat blooming under the bite, a steady pulse that wasn't pain. The room was quiet, except for the faint tick of water somewhere in the rock and the softer hush of the mountain itself. She had meant to undress and hadn't. The ceremonial gown tugged at her shoulders. A brass pitcher waited on the table beside a cloth-covered plate. Someone had come and gone while she slept. She sat up slowly, touched 2 fingers to the skin below the mark, and felt warmth answer the pressure. The heat flared once as if the wound had a heartbeat of its own, then settled. Beneath her ribs, that sleeping presence turned and sank again. Not a voice, not a thought, just a slow body rolling deeper. Boots stopped outside her door. A low voice came through the wood, careful not to startle. "My lady?" Serenia glanced at the latch even though he couldn't see it from his side. "Yes." "If you need the healer, say," the guard murmured. "Some take the bite hard the first night." "I don't," she said. "It's fine." "You say so?" the guard answered. There was a pause that sounded like he'd remembered an instruction late. "Bread and cheese if you can stomach anything, water in the pitcher. I'm Markel." "Thank you, Markel." Silence, then the soft creak of leather as he shifted weight, the sound of a man returning to stillness. She crossed the room on bare feet, lifted the cloth, and found a heel of bread still warm at its heart, a wedge of sharp cheese, a handful of dried fruit. She ate standing, because beds were too close to dreams. The air from the small high opening brought a damp thread of wind that smelled like wet stone and something green from far above. When the food steadied her, she set the plate aside and lay down again. She stayed awake long enough to be sure she could fall asleep when she chose. Then she let the dark take her under. Raven didn't try for sleep. He stood in the war room with his palms braced on a scarred table and watched lamplight tremble across old maps. Pins marked patrol routes and tunnels and the ravines that flooded when the thaw came fast. The taste of her blood still lived at the back of his mouth. Frost on iron, a bright edge that had nothing to do with hunger. Arendor leaned a hip against a support post, hands loose at his sides, eyes alert. "Veilheart boys were the shadows on the ridge," he said. "They wanted to be seen, not dead." "Let them be seen," Raven answered. He moved a pin 1 span west and set it down like a judgment. If Torek didn't send them, he'll pretend he did when the story reaches his table. Arendor's mouth turned as if he'd swallowed a laugh. "Calith stayed at Moonstone," he added. "She'll have eyes down here by tomorrow unless the stone eats her spies." "She'll have eyes if I let her," Raven said. "You marked the lady," Arendor said. "Not a question." "Yes, how does it feel?" Raven flexed his fingers and dragged a thumb along one of the pale bands the sun had written on his forearm. "Hot," he said. "Not fever. A different heat." "That's the bond," Arendor said. "Not only that," Raven said. Draven pressed forward in his mind, pleased. "She walks near the old hurt," the wolf said, "and it hums like a thing that remembers music." Raven didn't like that the ache he woke to each morning had softened to a hum now that she was under his roof. Liking that relief, was a kind of weakness. Naming it wouldn't make it less true. If your scars stop aching when she's near, Arendor said, we should decide if the pack gets hope or secrecy. Hope makes men reckless. Secrets make them mean. Both, Raven said. Arendor nodded. The old ones will test you, he warned. They've worn the curse like a cloak their whole lives. They won't thank you for taking it off. They can keep it if they love it, Raven said. I don't intend to let it keep them. And the bride? Arendor asked. How does she stand? Like someone who knows where to put her feet when the ledge is narrow, Raven said. She won't fall by accident. Good, Arendor said. He pushed off the post. I'll set the watches. The kitchen will send what she doesn't know to ask for. Raven gave him a look that was almost a smile. Already teaching. Somebody has to, Arendor said, and left. The lamp on the table hissed. Draven stirred again, curious. Go, the wolf suggested. See if the bond crowds a smaller room. Raven took the lamp and went. He didn't knock. His hand paused on the latch long enough to make sure he wasn't choosing not to knock out of pride. Then he turned the iron and pushed the door in just far enough to step through without rattling the hinges. Serenia sat on the edge of the bed with her feet tucked under her gown. Lamplight laid soft planes across her face and caught at the braid fallen over her shoulder. The mark at her throat held a faint warmth. Impossible and real, brightening and dimming with her pulse. I thought you didn't visit like a thief, she said. Thieves want not to be seen, he said. I don't. You don't leave, she said. Not when I have something to keep. She angled her chin toward the door. Your guard told me his name. Markel stands where I put him, Raven said. He's better at choosing where to stand when I don't. That's a talent at my father's hall, she said, choosing what you can. He crossed to the table and set his lamp beside hers. The small flames regarded each other and settled into a shared light. Does it hurt? He asked, and disliked that the question carried more weight than it should. It's warm, she said, like a candle under skin. You won't scar from the bite, will you? She asked, letting her gaze slide to the pale bands on his arms. From this. From me. He rubbed a thumb along one rope-white line. Not the way I'm used to. May I? He asked, and lifted his hand toward her throat. She held very still, thinking it through, then tipped her chin a fraction. He didn't touch the wound. He set 2 fingers a little below it, and waited. Heat rose to meet him, not human warmth, something finer, like standing near a fire that the stone had already learned to drink. The old ache in his scars eased another notch. Draven lifted his head inside him, interested. There, the wolf said. That's where it changes. Raven took his hand back before curiosity turned to want. You said you don't know what you are, he said. That is an answer. It's also a beginning. And you said most truth isn't useful at first, she said. So you plan to make it useful? I plan to make it, he said, her mouth almost smiled. Of course you do. Tomorrow at last dusk I'll take you to the high ledge, he said. You'll see the sky and I won't burn for it. You still assume I want to help you, she said. I assume you want enough choices to pretend the world isn't a cage, he said. Helping me gets you closer, and if I don't, then we live with what that makes of us. I don't bluff. I noticed. He stepped back to the door. The room had begun to feel too small for his control. You're not a prisoner, he said. You're not free. Both can be true for a while. You keep repeating yourself so you can tell when I mean it. He rested his palm against the door. The scars gave their usual low ache, then quieted as if the wood remembered her breath and gave it back to him. He didn't like needing relief. He liked less that liking it didn't matter. Raven, she said. He paused. When I said I wouldn't kneel in my mind, I meant it. Don't mistake quiet for surrender. I won't, he said. Don't mistake certainty for carelessness. And you aren't careless, she said. You're deliberate. It keeps my people alive. And you? Most days. Draven's low huff of laughter slid through his bones. He opened the door. The guard straightened outside. The hall breathed. He didn't want to say anything else. and wanted to say one more thing anyway. "You are going to change everything," he said, "whether you want to or not." "You've said that. I'll keep saying it," he said, "until it stops scaring you and starts making you angry." "What makes you think it scares me?" "The way it made you forget to breathe the first time." He left before she could tell him he was wrong or right. The corridor took him back toward maps and lists and the weight of a choice he would make again and again, until it either saved or ruined them. Serenia sat a moment longer, fingers resting on the rim of the basin. The water had gone still. In the shallow mirror, the bite looked like a jewel pressed into skin. She couldn't imagine it in sunlight, and let the failure to imagine be a fact, not a fear. She rinsed the cloth, pressed it to the mark, and felt warmth, bloom, and ease. Outside the door, footsteps shifted and rose and stilled, the rhythm of a pack settling into a long night. When she lay down, she didn't try to reach for the sleeping creature beneath her ribs. She let it be. The bond tugged once, a small, undeniable pull toward a man in another room, and she met it with stubborn stillness until it eased into a quiet ache, less like a chain than a horizon she didn't yet know how to cross. At the far end of the lower hall, Arendor traded a nod with Markel and wrote 2 names in his head for the next watch. In a room at Moonstone Hall where the ash had already begun to settle from the night's torches, Calith stood at a narrow window and watched the first gray of morning consider the scorched fields. She smiled without teeth and whispered to the glass as if it could carry the words through stone. "We will see, bride." By the time the lamps burned lower, the bite had stopped bleeding, and the heat under Serenia's skin was a steady ember she could ignore if she chose. She turned once and went still. Raven stood over his maps until the lines stopped meaning more than ink and memory. Draven settled down inside him like a large animal in a doorway, watchful and quiet. When he finally lay down, sleep didn't drag him under. It allowed him. His last thought was not the taste of frost and lightning, but the unkind, bright truth he'd let himself look at. He had bound himself to a woman who might unmake the curse he had built his name on. He didn't know if that meant he'd saved his people, or pulled a spark to his chest and called it warmth. Morning would come late under stone. Night still had hours to spend. The mountain breathed. The bond held. And the old ache in his scars, the one that woke with him every day of his life, stayed quiet until he stopped noticing and slept. The mountain did not wake with light, it woke with breath. Serenia surfaced to the slow hush of air moving through stone and the faint tick of water somewhere behind the wall. Heat pulsed under her skin where Raven had marked her, a steady glow that wasn't pain so much as attention. She sat up, braid heavy on her shoulder, and touched 2 fingers just below the bite. Warmth met her touch, flared once, settled. Beneath her ribs, something turned in sleep and sank again. Not a voice. Not thought. The sense of a large animal drifting deeper. A step paused outside. Leather creaked. A low voice came through the door, careful not to startle. "My lady?" "Yes. If you need the healer, say. The bite runs hot for some." "I'm Markel." "It's fine, Markel, thank you." A covered plate and a pitcher waited on the table. She ate standing because beds were too close to dreams, then opened the door. Markel straightened. He was young enough for eagerness and old enough to hide it. "The Alpha requests you join the morning meal if you're steady." "I am." Lamplight and braziers gave the halls a close gold dusk. The floor was worn where many feet had passed. The air smelled of metal and damp and smoke. People moved in 2s and 3s. Voices pitched low. No sunlight found these corridors. The mountain had taught them to live without it. The long hall fell quieter when she entered. Tables ran the length of the room. Wolves sat with their backs to stone, faces turned toward the door. Serenia felt their attention settle over her like a garment she hadn't agreed to wear. "Lady Serenia," came a smooth voice from down the table. "Welcome to Stone." Calith sat straight backed, a slash of dark red in a sea of gray and black. The gems at her throat winked like drops of blood that had learned to glitter. Her eyes skimmed Serenia with the frank patience of a woman judging fabric. "Thank you," Serenia said. She kept her tone even, offering nothing to grip. An elder woman with hair like steel wool and eyes to match crossed behind her, gaze clicking over the bite at Serenya's throat. The look wasn't cruel. It was an appraisal from someone who set weights on a scale and told you what you were worth. A whisper behind Serenya gave the name Myera. The doors at the far end opened. Conversation dipped by a notch without anyone seeming to lower their voice. Raven entered without escort and without hurry. Coal-black hair lay loose to his shoulders. Pale bands ringed his forearms where the sun had written him its hard letter. He took the chair to Serenya's left without asking if it was free. The scrape of wood on stone was not loud. It was the loudest thing in the room. "Good morning," he said, as if they were two ordinary people in a kitchen. "It is night where you live," she said. "And yet." Something old and warm pressed up behind his eyes. Draven's thought slid through him like a big body through water. Closer. "She smells like frost and warm skin." Serenya picked up her spoon. The heat at her throat pulsed when he lifted his cup to drink. She told herself it was a trick of attention. "Eat," he said quietly. "You'll need strength." "For what?" "For learning to be stared at and still be yourself." "I have practice. From your father's hall." She let the question pass. She wasn't going to lay Toric Valhard on this table like meat. Arendor stood near a pillar with a cup in his hand, speaking low to a knot of warriors. He noticed Serenya notice him and lifted 2 fingers in acknowledgement. It felt more like welcome than anything else in the room. A man limped in from the outer corridor with his forearm wrapped in damp cloth. He was older than Arendor, younger than Mara, with the air of someone who believed standing straight was a form of honesty. "Kale," Arendor called. "You should be with the healer, not the porridge." "I was told the Alpha was here," Kale said. "The story belongs to him first." "Report," Raven said, not rising. Kale peeled the cloth back. Angry red skin glared under the lamplight, blister-edged and wet. The burn ran wrist to elbow. A kiss that wanted to be remembered. "South tunnel mouth," Kale said. "I misjudged a flare by a breath. It took what it wanted and left the rest." A ripple of sympathy moved down the benches. No one made a show of it. The ashen wolves didn't make a spectacle of pain, but the sun's handwriting always took air out of a room. "Sit," Raven said. "You did your job." Kale sank onto the bench at Serenya's right with the careful breath of a man easing down a sleeping child. "Forgive me," he said to her, nodding toward the wound. "I know it doesn't bring appetite." "I've seen worse," she said before she could decide whether to comfort him. "Where I grew up, men bled to prove they were brave. Here," Kale said, "we try to be brave before we bleed." She reached for the pitcher and misjudged its weight. It tipped. Kale caught it with his uninjured hand. Her fingers brushed the angry skin. Heat leapt between them, a small bright fish breaking water. Serenya snatched her hand back. Kale inhaled as if someone had loosened a too-tight band around his chest. They both looked at his forearm. The red had lightened at the edges. Not healed. Not even close. But less raw. The hard blur of white blister softened. The wet shine dulled. The difference between a scream and a breath held through pain. Raven hadn't moved. His cup remained in his hand. Draven pressed his muzzle against the inside of Raven's skull, pleased and hungry all at once. "There. She mends the sun on us. Take more." Arendor was already stepping across the hall. His eyes went over Kale's arm, and then to Serenya's face with a calm that said he was adding columns in his head. He didn't waste a question. "I dropped the pitcher," Serenya said, already annoyed because annoyance hid other things. He helped. And Arendor said, "It changed," she said. Raven set his cup down because it gave his hand something else to do. "Eat," he told the room, voice even. "Southridge muster at dusk. Late men learn how fast I run without sun." A thin breath of laughter loosened shoulders. The hall resumed its rhythm with small relief. Calith lifted her cup, smile not reaching her eyes. "Finish," Raven said to Serenya, "then walk." He stood first. The room gave him its attention because it always did. then gave it back to the food because hunger was simpler than prophecy. Seraphina ate 3 more spoons for form and none for appetite, washed them down with water, and rose. The corridor beyond the hall felt cleaner, the way air feels cleaner after a storm even when it hasn't rained. "You're not going to pretend you didn't see it," she said as they walked. "I saw it," he said. "I'm not pretending about you. What did I do? You didn't do it alone." Your touch woke something in him that wanted to live. "Poetry," she said, because humor sometimes kept a door from shutting. "Observation. Come." He took her through a short stair cut from stone into a long room that had the proportions of a training yard without sky. Racks of weapons lined the walls. Chalk dust made a pale breath across the floor. He shrugged off his coat. Pale bands wrapped his forearms, old and newer, the sun's map laid in flesh. "You brought me here to fight," she said, "or to test me." "To keep curious eyes out," he said, "and to keep you from performing." He stepped close enough that she could see the gold threads in his irises. "I'm going to take your wrist," he said. "If you pull away, I'll let you." "I won't run," she said, and wasn't sure whether she was promising him or herself. He took her wrist. His skin was cool. The touch didn't burn. It sang, a thin wire drawn tight between her mark and his hand. "Tell me if you feel anything, define anything, heat, pull, the urge to bite me." His mouth tilted. "Anything useful for me to understand and dangerous for me to ignore." "Useful for you," she said. "Noted." He slid his hand from her wrist to the inside of her forearm, where the skin learned to hold warmth. The song changed key. "Draven," he said inwardly, because thinking at the wolf sometimes made the wolf articulate. "Information." "She is hunger," Draven said, lazy and precise. "She is balm. Press your scars to her. See which of you bleeds." Raven lifted Serena's hand and set her palm on one of the raised white bands. Muscle tightened under her fingers. He exhaled like a man bracing for impact and not receiving it. Heat traveled along her palm into the scar and came back. The band changed. Not much. The roughness softened. The chalk white shifted toward the color of old ivory. It looked less like a fresh insult and more like a story that had learned to be told without shouting. Serena's throat went tight. She didn't want to make a sound that he could keep. She tried to pull back. He held her a breath longer and then let her go before the part of her that wasn't mine bucked. "What did you feel?" he asked, voice lower now. "Heat," she said. "Honest, because lying would be stupid in a room without witnesses. Like warm water pushed down a channel. It went to your skin and came back. It sat between us and tried to decide whether it lives here now." "What did it decide?" "It hasn't. It's as stubborn as I am." Draven pushed harder, delighted. "She answers us." Take her hand again. Take her mouth. See if the magic runs there too. Raven ignored him with the practiced refusal of a man who had taught himself thirst in dry seasons. "Again," he said aloud. "Why?" "Because the difference between accident and intention is the difference between saving men and killing them. And because I want to know." The last sentence landed with more weight than a man like him usually allowed himself. "Once more," she said. "Then we stop." He pressed her palm to a different band. The hum tightened to a fine, bright line. The scar softened that same narrow measure. Something in her chest rose like a tide, lifted, settled. Her sleeping wolf rolled toward the surface and sank again. The water remembered the shape of the body moving beneath it. She pulled back first. He let her. "Enough," she said. "Agreed," he said, though he didn't step away. The lamps popped. The room remembered to be a room. "Who else knows?" she asked. "Kale." "Arendor. The guard who saw him limp. Whoever carries him to the healer. Calith will know by noon because she is the kind of woman who knows things before men admit they're true. And the elders. They will guess they have learned to love their cage and you put the lock there. And I will cut it loose," he said, not blinking, "if I can. With you if you let me. Without you if I must." The heat at her throat answered him with a bright agreeing beat. She didn't agree. You didn't ask me. We are past asking, he said. We are not past manners. Draven laughed, pleased. Bite him, the wolf suggested, not meaning skin. Raven's jaw worked once, not against anger so much as a small wild urge to take too much. Come, he said more quietly. You should see the ledge now that your feet remember our stone. You promised dusk, and I did, and I will take you then. But I want you to know the sound of wind here, before night turns it into something else. They left the yard without touching and more aware of not touching than seemed reasonable. In the corridor, Arendor fell into step without being called, eyes noting their faces and the space ahead. You saw, Raven said. Enough to start betting, Arendor said. Some already are. I told them I don't put coin on what I'm required to win. Spread the word. Southridge muster is strict. Anyone brave enough to face the sun unasked can borrow my bravery in the form of a blade. They'll hear it, Arendor said. They'll pretend they didn't until you say it again in a worse tone. He let his attention shift to Serenia. The elders are restless. That seems to be their habit. Myra will come wrapped in courtesy, he said. You'll need your own. I was given very little, she said. I learned to use what I had. Good. Wear it. Calith slipped out of a side hall and matched pace without being invited. Silk, whispering. I hear the morning went interestingly, she said. Light as a knife. You hear nonsense often and enjoy it, Raven said. It keeps your teeth sharp. And your attention, she said. Then turned a bright look on Serenia. Does it hurt? The bite, Serenia said, giving nothing else away. No. A pity, Calith said. We are made by our hurts. You seem to have been made very well. Calith's smile acknowledged the touch. Women have different maps for the same rooms, she said. We should talk. I'm not getting lost, Serenia said, but thank you for the compass. Calith's laugh was quick. She peeled away, perfume trailing like a rumor. They climbed. The narrow balcony cut from the mountain's face stole a view of the world without letting it burn anyone who looked. Old wards lay like a soft pressure in the air. Wind came in as if it had been invited. The land beyond rolled away in ash-colored folds. Far off, a dark seam marked forest. Somewhere in that direction lay her father's house with its straight walls and fruit trees that made a cathedral when the wind moved right. Here, the mountain spoke, and her breath answered. Breathe, Raven said, which made her want to hold her breath out of spite. She breathed anyway. The bite's heat pushed to the surface where the cold could feel it. A high note woke above them, too thin for anyone not already listening, as if the wards hummed when the wind stroked them. For a blink they shimmered at the edge of sight. She felt they were thinner than they should be. The feeling vanished like a dream she almost caught by a corner and lost. What, he said at once, because he had learned the look of someone who saw what he couldn't. Nothing, she said. The lie sat between them and did not move. Draven's curiosity pressed forward. She hides, the wolf said, amused. She smells like truth and lies braided together. The wind sharpened. Raven stepped closer to block it without thinking of chivalry. A strand of her hair caught on the rough place at his wrist. He could have shrugged to free it. He lifted his hand instead and eased it loose, careful in a way that would surprise men who thought they knew him. She held very still. The air between their skins did another bright electric thing and went quiet, as if the place itself had decided one such moment was enough for a morning. Eat at midday, he said, as if tenderness hadn't just happened. Train with Arendor's second. He won't go easy. I asked him not to. You ask a lot, I'm owed, he said, and didn't explain what he meant. They turned from the ledge. Arendor waited at the bend so he could see anyone coming. Your elders, Serenia said under her breath, are about to make me into a problem. They'll try, Arendor said. We'll see who finishes that thought. Myra stepped out from a side passage where the stone grew darker and took Serenia's measure again. This time, face to face. Lady, she said, smile neat as a seam. Walk with me. We owe each other a conversation, and it would be a shame to have it in a crowd. Raven didn't move to stand between them. He watched, and Draven rumbled the sound of a wolf settling with interest. Earn it, the wolf said, or take it. Serenia met Myra's steel eyes and nodded once. She followed the elder into the shadowed corridor, heat beating under her skin, wind still in her hair. Raven's careful untangling of it a fresh, unwelcome memory on her wrist. Myra led Serenia into a side corridor where the stone darkened and the lamps sat farther apart, as if light had to be earned here. The elder's steps were brisk. Her hands stayed folded, a posture that looked like prayer and felt like control. "You are smaller than I expected," Myra said without looking over. "I am exactly the size I've always been," Serenia said. "It's the room that changed." Myra's mouth tilted. "Good. Words with spine. Keep them. You will find that many in these halls speak softly so they can listen for danger." "I do not. I noticed. We have lived under a curse longer than you have been alive," Myra went on. "We have learned the work that keeps us breathing. New things disrupt work. New things break patterns. Sometimes they save us. Often they spill more blood, finding out which they will be. Is this the part where you tell me which one I am? If I knew, I'd either bless you in front of the altar or cut your throat quietly in a laundry room," Myra said. "I do neither, which means I wait and I watch." She stopped and faced Serenia fully. The bite on Serenia's throat glowed faintly in the low light. "The bond runs hot. You will feel pulled. You will think the pull is fate. It is not. It is a rope. Think hard before you let anyone tie it around your wrists." Serenia kept her chin level. "My wrists are my business, and not if your choices burn boys I taught to swing a sword," Myra said. "Not if your choices bring sun into rooms where it cannot be survived. So let me say the thing you came here knowing. If you harm this pack, if you change it into something we cannot live inside, I will take you apart with love in my heart and a clean knife in my hand." "Love," Serenia said softly. "Yes," Myra said. "The kind that keeps children alive. That kind of love is not gentle." Serenia breathed once steady. "I do not want your people dead." "What do you want?" "To be more than a bargain my father made," Serenia said. "To wake up and hear my own name before someone else says it for me. To not be a ghost in a room I live in." Myra's gaze flicked to the bite and back. "And the Alpha." "He is not my answer," Serenia said. "He is a question with teeth." Myra's laugh was a crack in stone. "Good. You are not useless." She stepped past, then paused. "We have a tradition here. If a bride comes from outside, she meets the elders at dusk and speaks her name into our air so it knows how to carry it. You will come, you will not be shy. What happens if I am?" "You will be eaten," Myra said, and left her in the dim hall with the smell of cold and old incense and the echo of the word love said like a threat and a promise together. At the bend, Arendor leaned one shoulder to the wall and pretended he had been posted there the whole time. He fell in at Serenia's side without fuss. "Well," he said. "She told me she would kill me with love if I broke you," Serenia said. "It was the kindest warning I've ever received." "That is Myra being affectionate," Arendor said, not joking. "She doesn't make those offers to everyone." He measured Serenia's face. "The whispers about you are growing faster than mold. Some call you a witch. Some say you're the moon's apology, wrapped in a dress." "And you," she said. "I like numbers," Arendor said. "I'm counting what you can do and how many people will try to own it. I won't be owned." "Good," he said. "It is easier to defend a person than a possession." He glanced past her. "He's coming. Decide how sharp you want to be when he asks you why you didn't ask for help." Raven's footfalls were unhurried, but space behaved differently around him. He stopped 2 paces away, as if he had marked the place where closeness would become a different conversation. "Did you enjoy your walk?" he asked. Serenia kept her voice even. "Your elder told me to earn my place and threatened to kill me if I failed. It was efficient." Raven's mouth moved a fraction, not quite a smile. "She is honest. You will appreciate that when others start sounding sweet." "You were nearby," Serenia said. "You heard. Enough to step in if the room tilted toward something unfortunate. And you didn't know. Why? Because if I stand between you and everyone who tests you, No one will respect you, Raven said. And because I don't need them to respect me. I already have that. I need them to respect you enough to stop thinking of you as a hostage. She hated that the logic was clean. She hated more that some small part of her respected it. You expect me to win a fight I didn't pick. We never pick most of the ones that matter, he said. We only decide how we stand. Her skin warmed under the bite. His eyes dipped there and climbed back to hers as if he could pretend he hadn't looked. Draven breathed laughter across his mind. She stands. She bares her throat and does not bow. Take her. Not yet, Raven thought back and hated the way yet tasted like hunger and strategy at once. Kale found them there, his arm rewrapped, face easier. Lady, he said. The healer told me to keep the salve on it and stop telling men a pretty woman cured me with a touch. Seraphina flushed. I didn't. I know, Kale said, amused. He lowered his voice. Hope is a problem here. Men spend it poorly when they're scared. I won't be the one to start that kind of spending. Thank you, she said. I owe you for a breath that did not hurt, he said. Speak it if you need it. Arendor tipped his head toward a lower passage. Training yard, he said to Seraphina. The Alpha asked you to learn our floors before you run them. Asked, she said. Ordered. Arendor corrected. But we use nicer words when we can afford them. The lower yard was less finished than the one above, rock rougher, mats thinner. Men and women moved through forms, sparring with blunt blades, sweat and breath working into the stone. A broad-shouldered fighter with gray in his hair and old scars across his knuckles stepped forward and bowed briefly to Arendor. Bren, Arendor said. This is Lady Seraphina. Teach her enough to be dangerous to anyone who thinks she is not. Bren's eyes were kind in a face that had learned not to show it. We start with feet, my lady. Balance will save your ribs more often than courage. I have both, she said. Good, Bren said. Then you'll only bruise a little. He began with stances. Serena's body remembered the orchard paths and the way you learned to move so branches didn't slap you. Bren corrected her hips, tapped her knee when it locked, made her hold a pose until the shake settled. She learned where to put her hands when she didn't want a man to think he could step inside the circle she drew around herself. Sweat beaded along her hairline. The bite's heat rose and fell with her breath. Raven watched from the catwalk above, elbows on the rail, as still as a statue cut from the same stone. Draven crowded close, fascinated. She fits here, the wolf said, in the heat and the stone. She moves like wind that learned to be careful and then forgot to pretend. She will not be careful with us, Raven thought, and felt something like relief at the honesty in it. On the mat, Bren tossed Seraphina a short staff. She caught it clumsily, adjusted, and found the weight. Bren came at her with a wooden blade and told her to block high. She did. The impact ran down her arms like a bell's tone. She did not drop the staff. The second strike came low. She missed and took the sting along her calf without stepping out of stance. Better, Bren said. Again. Men ringed the space now. Casual at first, then less so. The word witch in one corner, blessing in another. Arendor shut both down with a glance. The pack learned to talk with their mouths closed. Seraphina spun in a tight arc and brought the staff up in a move that would have cracked Bren's jaw if he hadn't caught it with the flat of his blade. He grinned, sudden and young. There it is. There was a small sound from above, not Raven, not Draven, something inside him relieved to see more than fear in the body he had brought home. After an hour, Bren lowered his weapon. Enough. If I make you better too fast, men will think it happened because of him and not because you were willing to be stubborn. Seraphina managed a breath that almost felt like satisfaction. My favorite compliment, she said. You were stubborn. Bren smiled. Wash. Eat. Let the ache tell you a story while you're still listening. Arendor came down the steps as she wiped sweat from her throat. The elders want you at last dusk, he said. Names, vows, and a chance for everyone to decide how virtuous they feel when they speak in public. And in private, Seraphina said. You'll hear the sharper edges later, Arendor said. Keep your own sharp. He glanced toward the far arch where silk and shadow suggested Calith's arrival before the woman herself appeared. Calith took in the circle of men and the glow on Serenya's skin as if she had ordered both, and they had arrived on time. Well done, she said lightly to Bren, then shifted her focus. Walk with me, Lady Serenya. My maps for these rooms are better than Mara's. Arendor half-turned, then didn't cross Calith's path. He could stop men with rank. Women required different rules. Serenya followed Calith into a side passage where the ceiling dropped and the light felt closer. Calith's perfume was warmer than the stone, spiced and complicated. You bruise well, Calith said. The pack prefers a mark that looks earned. You would know, Serenya said. I would. Calith agreed easily. When we thought I would be the one to stand where you stand, the elders reminded me every morning that a bride is a political object before she is a person. It is useful to learn where those two disagree. And did you? I learned that political objects shouldn't fall in love, Calith said, glancing sideways with a smile that might have been pity for someone else. They become bad at their jobs. They ask for things they cannot have and bleed in ways that stain floors. Do not worry, Serenya said. I am not in danger of that. You are in danger of underestimating the bond, Calith said. It rewards chemistry and punishes honesty. It will make you want to forgive him for everything that came before you were old enough to count it against him. I remember my numbers, Serenya said. Good, Calith said. Remember mine too. If you make him soft and it breaks us, they will not kill you in a laundry room. They will kill you in the high hall with witnesses who clap when the knife goes in. You'd be amazed how quickly righteousness finds a rhythm. She stopped where the passage opened on a small overlook, low and private. I do not hate you, Serenya. I hate that men call you fate and expect me to clap for their generosity. You want the same thing I do, Serenya said, to be more than a piece on someone else's board. Calith's mouth softened. I want the board. She tucked a stray hair behind Serenya's ear with a deliberate intimacy that felt like a dare. And I want you to stop pretending you cannot feel him from here. Serenya held still. The bond tugged a thin, steady line toward the direction of the catwalk, the way a river tugs a reed whether or not the reed admits it. I'm not pretending, she said. I'm refusing. There's a difference, Calith said, and left her there with a warning that felt too practical to be called jealousy. By late afternoon, the mountain took on a humming quiet that said the day would soon be handing itself to the night. Serenya found herself by the basin again, cooling her skin with a damp cloth, trying to decide what to wear to a room designed to judge her. She chose a simple dark dress that didn't look like Valahart's white or Ashen's ceremonial gray. When she turned, the bite caught the light. She did not cover it. The knock came without hesitation, gentler than any she had heard from him. Come in, she said. Raven stepped through and shut the door without giving the room more sound than it needed. He looked not at the dress, not at her hair, but at her face, like a man checking a weapon he intended to carry all night. You trained, he said. I did, she said. Thank you for lending me Bren instead of throwing me to a wall and telling me to learn. It was Arendor's idea, he said. I like to take credit when wise. You overheard Myra, she said. You let her test me. I did, he said, and you didn't protect me. I chose not to, he said. There is a difference. You expect me to be grateful. No, he said, surprising her. I expect you to be angry. Anger is energy I can use. Gratitude is a debt. Draven pressed at the back of his teeth. The wolf's voice was a low, amused growl. She stands and snaps. Reward her. Raven stepped closer, then stopped at that line where closeness meant something else. Last dusk, he said. The elders will ask you to speak your name. Do not be polite when you say it. What would you have me be? I would have you be true, he said. Politeness is a costume. Truth stains. She stared at him, half ready to cut and half ready to laugh without being sure why. You will stand at my shoulder and let them talk to me like I am a problem. I will stand where I always stand, he said, between my people and anything that eats them. If they try to eat you, I will pull them off your bones. If they only try to make you small, I will watch you refuse. You want to show it. I want a future, he said, with or without me in it the way I want. That last clause hung between them. He had not meant to give it away. He didn't pull it back. The bond tugged, a slow, hard pull like gravity remembered. Serenya's breath shortened without her permission. He noticed. His hand lifted an inch and stopped, as if the air had reached up and held his wrist. Don't, she said, though she didn't know whether she meant don't touch me or don't stop. He smiled without humor. I do not know how to obey that. Try, she said. He did. He lowered his hand. His control felt like a wire strung too tight. Draven prowled once and lay down again with a sound like a stone cat settling on a warm step. After, he said, voice steadier, when the elders are finished believing themselves, I will take you to the high ledge as I promised. You said you wanted the sky at night. I said I wanted choices, Serenya said. Then choose to come, he said. She held his eyes and let the quiet fill with everything they weren't saying. I will, she said at last, not because you told me to, because I like the wind more than rooms where people clap for knives. Good, he said. A small, real thing moved through his face and was gone. He opened the door. Arendor waited, with the patience of men who know every room in the mountain, and how long a conversation should take in each. Ready? Arendor asked Serenya. No, she said. She stepped into the hall anyway. They walked toward the elder's chamber through corridors packed with men trying to look like they weren't waiting to see if a story would start tonight. Calith stood at the threshold with Maera to her left and Kale behind them, arm cradled, eyes bright. Serenya felt the pull of the bond, the weight of the room, the breath of the mountain. Under her ribs, the sleeping wolf turned once and did not wake, a body approving of neither danger nor safety, only the fact of being alive. Speak your name, Mara said when the room quieted. Serenya Valahart, she said. The air carried it and gave it back, not as an echo, but as a new thing that would remember the shape of her mouth. And now, Myra said, we will see whether Stone knows how to hold it. Raven did not touch her. Arendor stood where he could count exits and men. Calith's eyes shone like bright coins held in the dark. Kale bowed his head for a breath, a private courtesy. When they asked their first sharp question, Serenya answered in a voice that did not owe anyone apology. When they smiled their first soft lie, she didn't return it. When someone said which too loud, Arendor looked at him and it became a memory. The night waited beyond the door. The ledge waited beyond the night. Between them stood a man who had not learned how to want quietly, and a woman who had never been allowed to want out loud. The bond pulled without mercy. They both stood anyway. Cedar smoke clung to the elder's chamber, trying to make sharp questions feel like ceremony. Stone benches cupped the room in a horseshoe. Lamps burned in the walls. Light gathered into small, obedient pools. Mara stood at the center with her hands folded, the posture of a woman who had chosen patience as a weapon. You spoke your name, she said. It fits. It is mine, Serenya answered. Names and oaths keep a people from becoming nothing but a list of wounds, Mara said. You arrive with neither of ours in your mouth. Your father traded you. Do you believe yourself traded? No. Explain. A trade implies equal value to the seller, Serenya said. My father made a bargain with his fear. I was convenient to it. That is not a trade. That is coward's arithmetic. A few of the elders shifted. Calith's mouth turned quick and small, as if enjoying more than she meant to show. Arendor's eyelids half lowered, hiding a grin he did not quite manage to hide. Raven stood near the edge of the circle, close enough that he could be at her shoulder in one step, far enough that his shadow did not touch her. One of the narrow-faced men leaned forward. Why are you here, then, if not to soften our nights and break our discipline? Because peace costs, Serenya said. I am the coin he chose. I did not agree to be minted. I am deciding what else I can purchase while I circulate. Kale, seated near the door with his arm wrapped cleanly, dipped his chin, like a man acknowledging good aim. The gray-bearded elder lifted his hand to slow the water rolling faster in the room. "You carry our alpha's mark," the elder said. "You carry talk that your touch quieted a wound the sun left. Is it talk or truth?" "It changed," Serenia said. "I did not mean it to." "It hurt less," Kale put in. "I am not healed. I am grateful to breathe without swearing for an hour." "Not yet," someone whispered. The word made the air thinner. "We do not stand on not yet." Mara cut across. "We stand on what we can live with. Lady Serenia, if your touch can unmake what the sun does to us, you will be something we have not seen in a lifetime. If your touch makes hope, and hope makes men careless, you will be something else, and I will treat you as such. Do you understand me?" "I do," Serenia said. "Do you plan to harm us?" "No. Do you plan to save us?" Serenia let silence settle long enough to be honest. "If what I am helps people breathe, I won't keep it for myself. If it becomes a leash, I will burn it before anyone gets their hands on the rope." "There she is," Caleth murmured. "Which?" The narrow-faced man spat louder. The word tried to stand up. Arendor's attention took its legs. The man's mouth shut as if he'd bitten down on glass. Raven spoke, voice flat enough to steady stone. "You will not call my bride by names you can't weigh. Bring your ledgers to me if you want to judge loyalties. Until then, keep your words heavy or keep them." A small approval moved at the corner of Myra's eye. "We would not have this talk if I did not wish you to stand here," she told Serenia. "I could have made you smaller in a kinder room. I am not kind. I am careful. Come to me when you wish to know who smiles at you and counts your bones after you leave." "Thank you," Serenia said. The bite at her throat warmed, a pulse that answered its own name. "We are finished," Myra said. "The night has other work." Benches scraped, the room loosened. Caleth drifted past Serenia and let the back of her fingers touch Serenia's sleeve, a brush so precise it could have been sympathy. It felt like a test. Kale stood with a brief bow that made no ceremony of debt. Arendor moved to Raven's side and waited. "Walk," Raven said to Serenia when the room had emptied into a murmur. They took a narrow stair that climbed in a long slant and opened onto the high ledge. Night lay on the world like cool cloth. The wards pressed soft against skin, old and patient, a net of thin song woven into the stone. Below, the ash valley breathed in low folds. The forest beyond was a black line with teeth. Lamps strung along the lower halls made moving constellations. Raven stopped a half-step closer than the ledge required, as if his body had decided where the wind wanted him. Draven pressed up inside him, all smoke and silver eyes. "She belongs here," the wolf said, pleased, "in our shadow, in our mouth." "Not yet," Raven answered, and the word tasted like control and hunger both. "Out there," Serenia said, her chin lifted toward the dark seam of trees. "My father has orchards. In spring the blossoms look like lace thrown over bone. When the wind moves right, the grove remembers it was wild. For a minute." "He will count tonight as success," Raven said. "He will call it that," Serenia said. "Counting is his prayer. He will sleep easier because someone else is awake here." "Men like him don't sleep," Raven said. "They lie down and keep moving. It chews them thin. Their faces forget surprise. You sound as if you know him." "I know his kind," Raven said. "Only names change." She kept her eyes on the valley. "When I was small, he told me wolves were storms with teeth. We closed shutters. We turned lamps. We kept our voices down so the house would sound empty. Did it work?" "It taught me to be quiet," Serenia said. "It did not teach me to be brave. I had to find that alone." "Courage comes after anger in most people," he said. "In you it seems to arrive before either. It arrives when it has to." She stepped nearer the stone lip, not reckless, testing the balance that had nothing to do with feet. The wards hummed faintly, a high thread. For a heartbeat the air above the ledge shimmered, there and gone. She felt age in the magic and a tiredness that was not weakness but wear. Something in her blood rose toward it in quiet recognition, as if she were standing near a fever and could tell whether it would break. Her palm found the carved edge where the ward sank into the rock. The hum sharpened under her hand. It didn't welcome. It recognized. Heat ran up from the bite and pooled in her shoulder. She didn't know if she made the ward steadier or if they only liked being noticed by something that noticed back. "What is it?" Raven asked. "Quick." "Wind," she said, and left her hand where it was. His pupils thinned. Draven cocked his head inside him, curious. "She lies," the wolf said. "Not unkind. She is afraid of the truth before it has teeth." "Keep what you need," Raven said, "but don't let keeping it make the wards fail." "You think I would decide that?" "I think you already decided you will try," he said. She lifted her hand, the hum slid back to its earlier pitch. The magic felt tired again. She exhaled slowly. "How many times did you test the sun?" she asked. "Twice. Why the second?" "I refused the first lesson," he said. Her gaze went to the pale band circling his forearms. "Does it still hurt?" "Always," he said. "Less today, and because of me, yes." They let quiet settle. Wind pressed fabric to bodies. The thin song of the wards threaded the air. The bond's heat rose like a hand over coals, not touching, making its case. "Tell me what the sun feels like," she said. "Like someone holding your face and telling you the truth before you are ready to hear it," he said. "Keep listening and you don't come back." "In the night?" "A lie we can live in," he said. "I've made it useful." "Kiss her and see if night can tell the truth," Draven murmured, amused and intent. Raven ignored him and lost a breath anyway. A strand of Serenya's hair snapped against her cheek. He tucked it behind her ear without thinking. The touch was careful and brief. The bond flared, heat running down her throat and circling back, quiet and relentless. She saw his throat move as he swallowed the want. She hated the way her breath shortened. She stepped a small measure away and set her back to the stone. "Do not use me as a tool," she said. "Not for your elders. Not for the stories you tell boys so they don't die." "I don't use tools I can't keep," he said, and winced as the words left his mouth. He tried again. "If what you are can help my people, I will ask. I will pay for it in the coin you name. I will not force you. I will not break you into a shape that fits my hand even when the worst part of me wants that more than anything." "I am not merciful," she said. "Neither am I," he said. "But I can learn. From me." He didn't say yes. He didn't have to. A bell rolled up from the lower halls, the soft note the pack used when shifts turned. Time re-entered the night. "We should go," he said. "Not yet," she said, and surprised herself. They stood until the cold had a say. When they turned inward, the passage felt warmer for the wind they were leaving behind. At the stair, Arendor waited without pretending he'd been anywhere else. "All quiet," he said. "For now," Raven answered. "Mara has asked her people to keep the word witch out of rooms where you aren't there to answer it." Arendor said to Serenya, "It's as much of a favor as she gives." "I'll take the silence," Serenya said. "I don't need the favor." Back at her door, Raven didn't reach for the latch. He stopped close enough for heat to mean something. The mark at her throat answered his breathing. She tipped her chin. Not invitation, not refusal, the exact place where honesty had to be chosen. "Rest," he said, "if I can." "If you can," he echoed. He didn't step away immediately. Draven pressed along the bones of his will, urging and amused. "Take a little more," the wolf said. "She is right there, and she smells like what we were promised." Raven put his palm to the wood by her head instead of to her. His scars hummed where her warmth reached. "Thank you for how you stood," he said. "I have heard brave words that soured after. I did not feel sorry when you spoke." She almost smiled. "That is the ugliest compliment I have ever liked. It is the best kind." Down the hall, Arendor studied a bracket with interest no medal deserved. Kale limped past with the nod of a man who understood owing and meant to repay. The wards sent a high, thin thread through the stone, a sound only the already listening could hear. Raven stepped away first because he needed to prove to himself that he could. He nodded to Arendor and turned toward the war room instead of toward his wand. Inside, Serenya left the lamp unlit and let the room arrange itself by memory. The bond tugged steady as tide, less chain than gravity. If she held very still, she could pretend it was only the mountain breathing. She touched below the bite with the back of her fingers. Warmth waited there, patient. The sleeping thing under her ribs turned closer, a slow body taking up more space, not waking, existing with intent. Across the hall, Raven stood in his own doorway and didn't go in. Draven lay down like a great animal at the threshold of a house it intended to guard. The scars along Raven's wrists pulsed once and eased. He closed his hand around them and counted breaths until control felt like choice and not just habit. He did not sleep yet. He let the maps ask their questions and answered none. When he finally lay down, it was beside a small, high window, where the wind could find him if it wanted. He breathed in the faint relief his scars had learned from a stranger's touch and allowed the desire for more. He intended to deserve it, or keep it from costing the wrong blood. Seraphina lay on her side and watched the darkness where the wall opening met the night. The sound of the pack settling rose and fell beyond the door. Somewhere a child laughed and was hushed. Somewhere a knot resisted a patient hand. The mountain held all of it, and for now it held her. She spoke her name once softly. The air carried it back the same and unbroken. She closed her eyes and let the dark take her because refusing would not change its mind. The wards hummed their thin song. The bond held steady, not merciful, not cruel. Dawn would not spill here as it did in orchards, but the mountain had its own measures. They would learn them or break on them. For this hour, wind rode its finger along stone, heat answered under skin, and two people in separate rooms refused to admit they were breathing the same breath. The mountain woke with breath and the weight of what had been said the night before. Seraphina rose into it heavy with heat under her skin, and the steady tug of the bond, like a quiet hand at her throat that wouldn't remove itself out of courtesy. The lamplight painted the chamber a soft gold. She had only reached the door when it opened without a knock. Theon filled the threshold the way a storm fills a horizon. Black hair loose, steel-gray eyes alert, the pale bands the sun had written along his forearms, stark in the dim. He did not smile. "You stay in this wing today." "Good morning to you as well," she said, and made no move to step aside. He came close enough to move her hair with the backs of his fingers, bearing the mark at her throat. Heat answered the touch, a measured pulse that angered her because she had not given it permission. His gaze did not waver. There are too many eyes in the lower halls. Too many mouths. I will not have them inventing uses for your name. "You mean you will not have them inventing uses for me?" she said. "The difference is academic," he said. His hand slid from her hair to her wrist and closed there with the care of a man testing a chain he already trusted. "Last night you kept the elders honest. Today you let them forget they wanted to try you." She tugged once. He didn't release her. "Theon." "Do not use my name like a door," he said, leaning in until cedar and iron crowded her breath. "You are not going through me." "Then stop standing in the frame," she said. Inside his skull, a deep voice rolled up like thunder breaking through stone. "She bares her teeth," Kale said, amused. "Mark her again and be done with it. Let the hall taste what is ours." "Not here, not yet," Theon told him. The wolf laughed low and let the suggestion hang. He released her and stepped back a pace that still felt like proximity. "Breakfast will be brought. If you need anything, you ask Arendor first. You have never struck me as a man who delegates his obsessions." "I'm learning economy," he said. He turned for the door and then changed his mind. Two fingers hooked under her chin and lifted until her eyes took his without flinching. Another mail arrived before dawn. "He wants a tour, a seat, and the use of my patience. He will have none without my hand on them. That includes you." "I am not furniture," she said, and "no, you are fire. Men steal fire to warm themselves." He dropped his hand and left. The room felt smaller after he closed the door. Seraphina crossed to the high slit in the wall where wind slid through, cool and clean with stone. She laid 2 fingers below the bite. Heat rose to meet them, steady and intent. Under her ribs, something vast rolled closer to the surface and then sank again. Not a voice, Not yet. The promise of a living thing that refused to be named. A knock that was gentle this time. Arendor came in with a tray and the readiness of a man who solved problems by being there. He set the food down and studied her like a battlefield he already knew how to cross. "You ate yesterday," he said. "Do it again." "My favorite orders are the ones I already planned to follow," she answered, but took the cup. His glance touched the mark and moved on. Unembarrassed. Efficient. "He is pacing," Arendor added. "The Lycan King arrived and asked for daylight. I told him we serve from stone. He said cold rooms never offended him." "Anthony," Seraphina said before she could change her mind. Arendor's brow lifted a fraction. Names always sound like bells when kings enter rooms. He wants an audience and a list. What kind of list? What we have and what we don't. Which tunnels leak, which elders bite, which bride breathes. Arendor's face softened half an inch. "Plan your words. Men like him collect them the way Caliph collects favors." "Caliph collects everything," she said. "Useful," he said. "Dangerous. Eat." He left with a nod that felt like both warning and promise. Seraphina ate because she suspected someone would count it. She braided her hair tight to keep it from becoming a handle. She chose a dark dress that said neither Valahart white nor ashen gray and opened the door. Two guards she didn't know straightened to attention. Theon had decided she would be seen and contained at once. He was waiting in the small sitting room that had been hers less than a day. He had chosen the chair with a view of every exit. He rose not to be polite, but to make sure she knew he decided when people moved. "Stay near me," he said. "I wasn't planning to climb the chimney," she said. "Then this will be easy." He offered his arm. She walked beside him without touching. His eyes counted the distance and said he would remember it later. They did not go to the broad hall where talk grew like moss. They entered a narrower chamber with a low ceiling and a long table. Lamps pooled into obedient circles against stone. Arendor stood to the right, with his weight balanced to move. Kale sat near the door, his forearm wrapped cleanly, face easier than yesterday. Two lieutenants watched with the open attention of men trying to learn a new language, without letting anyone see their mouths, sound it out. Maera waited by the head of the table, hands folded, patience sharpened to a point. Caliph leaned half in shadow, the red silk of her dress making everyone else look like background by accident. Theon took the chair at the head because the room always made it for him. Seraphina kept a step to his left, close enough to be counted. Not so close she would forget what it meant. Anthony entered as if the stone had been laid to make way for his stride. Sun-burnished skin, dark hair tied back loosely, the kind of bearing that made rooms imagine they had windows. His golden eyes moved around the table with polite interest, paused on Seraphina, and the air altered. Cyrus spoke in his mind, voice cool and regal under the muscles. "Her scent is wrong on him. Right on us." "We did not come for that," Anthony answered, and felt the lie press its thumb to the back of his tongue. Theon set his hand lightly on Serena's wrist. The touch was small and absolute. The heat under her mark answered with a slow, humiliating bloom. "You have my hospitality," Theon said, "not my patience. It spent quickly." Anthony's mouth turned. "I brought respect and a request. Respect because you've held the south tunnels through winters I would not have trusted, and a request because news delivered by messenger makes cowards of men who need to look at each other when they hear it." "News first," Theon said. "Respect lands where it likes." "A ward line failed east 2 nights ago," Anthony said. "A patrol took sun before they knew it. We buried one. 2 burned. My healer kept them from losing more." The room contracted. The sound of breath changed shape. Kale's wrapped forearm seemed to make its own heat. Maera's eyes did not soften. Arendor's mouth made a small hard line and vanished. Calith's lashes lowered, hiding satisfaction or sorrow or the preparation of a story. "We will reinforce our lines," Theon said without looking away from him. "Arendor, note it." Arendor nodded once, the gesture of a man who had already moved 3 pieces no one could see. Anthony's gaze tracked down to Theon's pale scars, then to his hand resting on a smaller wrist. When he looked back up, his voice remained even. "Your mate. My condolences and congratulations. Serenia held his eyes. Her body knew something her mind had not signed. Her heartbeat shifted. She despised that he could hear it. Theon's thumb brushed her skin once, a warning disguised as thoughtless touch. Cyrus came closer, composure showing its teeth. She is ours, and he is using her like a banner. We do not steal marked things, Anthony told him. We reclaim them, Cyrus said, and let the idea settle like a challenge under the ribs. Arendor cleared his throat softly. If the East Line failed, the old wards are tiring everywhere. We should act before collapse teaches discipline. We will check ledges and lower vents by last dusk, Theon said. He set his gaze back on the king. You will not see sunlight while you're under my stone. I assume you enjoy having eyes? I prefer not to burn, Anthony said. But I came for more than ward lines, and we both know it. Then stop circling and bite, Caliph said from the shadow. Warm as wine and twice as sharp. We have work. Anthony's attention slid to her and returned to the head of the table. I hear your bride speaks in rooms that tried to be rid of her and leaves them quieter. I hear she touched a wounded man, and the pain stepped back. I would like to know how many of your stories are useful. We do not feed strangers with what we have not measured, Theon said. He did not release Serenia. But I will not pretend it wasn't cold to keep you from noticing that it is. She touched a wound. It changed shape. That is all anyone on this stone knows. Anthony looked at Serenia as if he were reading a page he refused to dog-ear. The bond tugged hard as a rope a child had decided to swing on. She did not look away. Theon's thumb pressed again. It might have been accident. It was not. Kale stood with a careful breath. Alpha, if the king has taken enough of our listening, I have men who like to be told when not to die. Go, Theon said. Arendor, with him. Take 2 boys who think fear is something they can borrow and show them it isn't. Arendor rose, eyes crossing Serenia's face like a hand that didn't touch. He left. Kale nodded to Serenia, the smallest bow a man could make without making her smaller for receiving it, and followed. Anthony did not move to go. He set one hand on the back of a chair as if to sit or break it depending on what the next breath required. The king will walk our halls, Mara said to the air. The king will do so with eyes and not hands. I want to pay my respects to your wards, Anthony said. Theon stood. He did not release Serenia. He leaned close enough that she had to tilt her chin to keep her gaze level. Stay, he said, quiet and exact. I am not a blade you leave on a table and find exactly where you put it, she said. Stay, he repeated, softer, more dangerous. Kyle's thought uncoiled, pleased. Hold her. Let the other male taste what he cannot take. Serenia felt the bond's ache turn persuasive. She hated the body for how often it tried to be loyal to the wrong thing. She did not move. Anthony watched. Cyrus went still in the way of predators who choose their moment. Theon left with Anthony, 2 men who knew how to walk beside a third thing without acknowledging it in words. Mara drifted after with 2 elders like stones, with purpose. Caliph remained. You enjoy complicated maps, Caliph said lightly. Be careful. Men who draw them rarely admit they want to get lost. I do not intend to get lost. You do not intend many things. They happen anyway. She stepped close enough that the red hem brushed Serenia's shoe. If you need the names of those who smile and count your bones after you leave a room, Myera has them. If you want the ones who smile and would rather count his, I have those. Why offer them to me? Because I hate waste, Caliph said. Because soft is not the same as weak on you, and I enjoy the look on elder faces when they learn that. And because this will get worse before it gets better, and I am not made to watch politely. She left with her perfume and a trail of attention that behaved like a leash on other people's heads. Serenia stood in the doorway and let the wind from the high slit write a thin line of cold along her neck. The bite warmed in answer. In the deep water under her ribs, something stirred again, nearer than the day before. A vast body choosing to take up a little more space. Theon brought Anthony down along the ward lines like a man showing a knife he had sharpened with his own teeth. Arendor joined them in the passage, gave a report without looking the king in the eye longer than respect required, and fell in behind. Lamps hissed. Stone held its breath. "Your stone sings," Anthony said. "Not a compliment. A fact." "It sings warnings," Theon said. "We learned the pitch a long time ago." Cyrus moved through Anthony with a steady danger. He is all edges. She will cut herself on him or he will swallow his own blade. We could be a different edge. "We are not carving anything," Anthony answered, and heard himself want to be wrong. They reached a narrow balcony where wind pushed in thin, hungry threads. Theon gestured to the grooved stone where the wards sank into the mountain. He did not touch it. He didn't need to. The cliff ran through him like a name through blood. "The ward holds," Anthony said. "Today," Theon said. Anthony looked out and then back. "You took a bride to build a bridge to a man who would burn you if it bought him a season. Do you know the price?" Theon's jaw worked once. "Tell your messengers the lines hold. Tell those who listen to you to let the ashen wolves keep their night. And your bride?" Anthony said so quietly the wind nearly kept it. "Will she keep it?" "She keeps what I tell her to keep," Theon said, and left before the lie could sit down between them and make a home. When he returned to the private wing, Serenia was where he had left her, standing by the high slit with her face tilted toward the breath of wind as if she could learn something from it that stone could not deny. He crossed the room and stopped close enough that her braid brushed his chest when the air moved. "You kept your word," he said. "No," she said. "I kept mine." He stepped around until they faced each other, close enough for the lamp to lay the same narrow, bright edge down both their wrists. His gaze searched her face as if he could inventory truths there and stack them where they would be useful. "Anthony will leave soon. I am sure he will find the correct corridor," she said. His hand lifted, fingers brushing the fine edge of her jaw. The bond surged under that small contact, heat closing around them, without smoke or flame. Kale pressed against the bars of Theon's will with a satisfied rumble. "Tell me something true," Theon said. "You want what I am more than who I am," she said. "Both," he answered without blinking, and took his hand back, before want made him careless in a room with 2 guards and a man down the hall who listened for breath that changed. Boots moved somewhere beyond. The day under stone turned toward the hour when everything became harder to ignore. Theon looked at the door like he could order it to behave. Then he looked back at her and allowed the truth he had been trying not to name since last night. He had led her into the part of the mountain that did not belong to anyone but him. "You come to the high ledge with me tonight," he said. "The wards should hear your breath like the elders did. You want me to shout at the cliff, and I want you to breathe on it," he said, "and I want to watch what it does with that breath." He left before staying made him a liar. The latch closed soft. Serenia stood and listened to the mountain's slow inhale. She pressed 2 fingers lightly below the mark. Warmth waited there, patient, unashamed. Deep under, the sleeping thing rolled a fraction nearer and held. It did not speak. It did not promise. It existed with intent. Far below, Arendor briefed patrols in the ordinary cadence that kept men alive. Kael tested the wrap of his arm and grinned privately when the ache failed to answer its name. Maera wrote 2 names in her mind and drew a line under one. Calith leaned against a column and smiled like a woman who had already set her next 3 moves in motion. And in a guest chamber colder than comfort and warmer than honesty, Anthony sat with his hands open on his knees while Cyrus told him the one thing he did not want to carry out of these halls. "She is wrong on him," the wolf said. "She is right where our mouth is." "We did not come to take," Anthony answered. "Then we will leave hungry," Cyrus said, and settled down to wait. Theon did not knock when he returned. He opened the door and let the breath of the corridor slide in ahead of him, cooler than the room, and edged with iron from the lamps. He closed it with a quiet click that felt like a hand settling on the back of her neck. "Walk with me," he said. Another corridor, narrower than the others, ran along the outer face of the private wing. Slits in the stone took the wind in careful measures. Theon set a pace that asked to be matched, not chased. He said nothing until the passage turned at a blind corner and opened on a small sitting room that had been cut into the rock like an apology. No guards here. A brazier breathed. A decanter stood on a table with 2 cups. He went to the window, which was not a window, only a cut in the wall where night pressed close. "You are going to say something I will not like," Seraphina said. "I am going to say something true," he said. "You will decide you do not like it because you wish it were kinder. Say it." He turned. The lamp found the pale bands on his forearms and wrote them again in gold. "You do not belong to Anthony's stories," he said, "or to mine. But mine will keep you alive. His might make you feel brave at the wrong moment and then make me bury men I need." "You mean make you bury me," she said. He looked at her and let the quiet fill with the things he did not intend to say. Then he came close enough that the air warmed where he stood. He did not touch her. He placed his hand on the back of the chair at her hip and leaned in without closing the distance he could have closed and kept. "Look at me," he said. She did. The bond turned slow in her throat, heat without mercy or smoke. "When men like him walk through other men's houses with their hands open," Theon said, "they mean to take whatever looks most like a crown. If he can't have the stone, he will try the torch. You burn brighter than my lamps. Keep your light to yourself." Her mouth curved, not kind. "If you are worried about my safety, stop telling me where to stand and tell me the truth about what you want me to be." "What I want," he said, "is for you to learn why my wolves live when others burn. What I want is for you to keep the thing under your ribs from waking and making every man who hates my name decide to be a hero in the wrong direction. What I want is for you to live long enough to decide what you want in a room where wanting doesn't cost anyone their eyes." He paused. "And I want to touch you, without turning that want into a story someone else gets to use." Cale pushed up under the words with a low, pleased sound. "She should be under us," the wolf said. "The stone should remember how our mouth fits her name." "Not yet," Theon told him, and the refusal cost more breath than it should. He lifted a strand of Serena's hair where it had worked loose and set it behind her ear like he had no right to do it, and had decided to anyway. His fingers did not touch skin. It was somehow worse. "You are not subtle," she said. "No," he said. "It keeps me honest." A knock touched the door. Arendor stepped in, eyes taking the room in one sweep. He was careful not to look at the space between them too long. "Report," Theon said. "Lower vents hold," Arendor said. "2 hairline cracks we will fill before last dusk. The east gallery hums higher than usual when the wind runs from the ravine. I have men listening and hammers ready." He glanced at Seraphina then, and the look was a question he did not put into words. Theon heard it anyway. "Later," he said, and Arendor inclined his head once, leaving when dismissed without leaving the impression he had gone far. Theon poured water, handed her a cup, and watched her drink. His eyes dropped to her mouth the way a man looks at a weapon he has decided not to draw. The urge to test a line walked through the room like another breath. "You wanted truth," he said at last. "Here is mine. If I had met you anywhere else, I would have taken you anyway." His voice had the weight of a stone you could sit on without worrying it would roll. "We are not playing at a thing I would not have chosen without a treaty to give me an excuse." A tremor of anger moved under her skin and up into her words. "Thank you for your honesty. It fits your ring of kindness very well." He laughed, brief and without humor. "I told you, not kind." The door opened again without ceremony because Calith did not knock in rooms where she felt at home. She leaned in the frame with the ease of someone who had learned all the rules and decided which ones made her pretty when she broke them. "Alpha," she said. "Lady, the king is touring your patients. I thought you might want to know where his feet are before his eyes start making promises." "Where is he?" Theon asked. "Near the inner gardens," Calith said. "Near the old copper gate that everyone pretends is still locked." She turned to Seraphina. "It has the best wind in the hall. I'm sure you will see it from your wing someday." Theon did not look at Seraphina. His jaw flexed once. "Arendor," he called, not loudly, and the man appeared as if the walls had decided to pull him through. "With me," Theon said. "Calith, go teach someone to be useful." "I will begin with the man who put the copper gate there," Calith said, and smiled. She left with a brush of silk and purpose. Theon's gaze cut to Serenia. "Stay where I told you." "I heard you," she said, and he left. The door closed, the room exhaled. She did not disobey immediately. She took 3 breaths and counted them. She walked to the high slit and let the thin wind thread her hair. She thought of being a blade on a table. She disliked the image enough to set it down and pick up another. Markel waited outside with another guard and a look that said he had not forgotten the brief conversation through the door last night. "The Alpha told me to keep this hall small," he said. "I am not trying to make it large," Serenia said. "I am trying to put air in it." "There is air in the inner gardens," he said after a small pause. He did not move aside. He also did not stop her when she stepped around him with the kind of courtesy only a stubborn man offers to a stubborn woman he thinks he might like. The inner gardens were not gardens so much as a patience of plants. Feral vines a few generations from wild had learned to live in lamplight and on wet stone. Moss glowed faintly on the shaded side of rock pillars. A narrow channel of water threaded through and made a private sound. Someone, long ago, had brought soil from the valley and convinced 3 small trees to learn the mountain. They seemed to be listening for birds they would never hear. She found the copper gate by the way the air moved near it, slipping through a seam where stone met old metal. It was not locked. It had not been locked for years. Beyond it, a small terrace cut into rock held a bench worn smooth by people who had not wanted to admit they were tired. He was there. She knew it before she saw him, the way the air held its breath and the way her own did. Anthony stood with one palm against the carved edge where the wards sank into the stone. He turned at the sound of her steps with the unhurried attention of a man who had decided not to pretend surprise. "Lady Serenia," he said. "Anthony," she answered, and then regretted the familiarity because she could already feel it become part of the ledger men would keep. Cyrus pressed into Anthony's mind with controlled satisfaction. "See? Even the air knows. She comes where our breath is." "We are not hunting," Anthony said, and let his hand fall from the stone. "You should not be here," she said. "Nor should you," he said. "It seems we both left breadcrumbs and followed them." His eyes went to her throat. She did not cover the mark. He noticed the choice. The wind lifted a strand of her hair and set it back again with more tenderness than anyone else had offered her today. "Theon will not like this," she said. "Theon does not like anything he cannot name," Anthony said. "I did not come to take something he owns. I came to keep a different kind of fire lit." "You speak as if you know me." "I know what you are," he said, and she held still. "Then say it." He did not look away. "Your body hums like a ward when you touch the old hurt. You did it to a burned man and to the Alpha, and you pretended both times it was accident. It was not. You are the old story every man who hates this curse has prayed for and feared." Her mouth went dry. The stone felt too close. She kept her voice low. "If you knew this before you came, then you knew what the elders would try to do with me. And you walked in anyway to watch." "Yes," he said, honest in a way that did not flatter either of them. "And to warn you. Men who want miracles start by writing laws. Then they write sentences. They will put you in both." She swallowed. She wanted to ask how he knew. She wanted to ask what else he assumed. Instead, she said, "You think Theon will put me in a law, and then a sentence?" "I think he is trying not to," Anthony said. "I think he will fail if he is alone." Cyrus hummed, pleased and predatory. "Bring her out. Steal the line from his mouth." Anthony's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, careful with the space the way one is careful with a blade's edge. "You do not belong under stone," he said. "Not forever. If you want to leave, say it. I can make a corridor where there is none." She felt her own breath change and despised it. The thing sleeping under her ribs rolled toward the noise, not awake, not speech, only attention. She thought of orchards and glass to keep frost off fruit. She thought of tunnels. She thought of a hand on her wrist that had not been cruel but had not asked. "I do not want to be taken," she said. "If I leave, it will be because I chose an open door, and not because someone lifted me through a window." His mouth softened by a fraction. "Good," he said, "then choose one." He gestured at the terrace. "Or choose to sit and breathe, before the next hour asks you to be iron again." She sat because her legs had been telling her to, and because refusing would have been a pose she disliked. He did not sit. He leaned on the carved lip with his forearms bare. His scars were not Theon's. They were old, pale crosses, and lines a life of training writes on a body that refuses to break. "You said you know what I am," she said. "Do you know why?" "There is a scroll in my hall that speaks of the moon's debt," he said. "It names a daughter born in the shadow of orchard walls and night storms, and says her blood will remember the first heat that kept wolves from freezing when the world was new. It is a lovely story. My father called it pretty nonsense. I learned that pretty nonsense sometimes stabs you while you are still admiring the ribbon." The word daughter put cold in her mouth. "My father does not believe in pretty nonsense," she said. "He believes in making columns add up to his advantage." Anthony's attention sharpened. Then he believed this very easily when it served him. The wind came in a little stronger, thin fingers sliding under her hair. Her skin prickled. The bite warmed the way a wound warms when someone you do not trust comes near it. He came to the edge of her space and stopped there. "I am not asking you for anything tonight," he said quietly. "I am not offering anything. If you want help, look for me at last dusk on the ledge that faces the ravine. If you do not come, I will leave your hall without breaking anything I cannot afford. But know this, if you stay here and fold yourself small to keep men from clapping when your strength makes them feel safe, you will hate yourself so fiercely, the bond will turn mean. Do not let it." Cyrus's thought slid through him like a shadow. Kiss her and see if she tastes like the story. He kept his hands at his sides. The self he had made for public rooms and old men held his body in place. Seraphina stood because sitting felt like surrender. The bond pulled, unkind and undeniable, toward another corridor where a different man was even now deciding which edges to show when he saw her again. When she stepped past Anthony, he drew in the air she left like a starving man smelling kitchens. She paused because the movement made her feel cruel. "If you plan to walk me back," she said, "do not touch me. I am tired of men making marks in rooms and calling them maps." He inclined his head. "As you ask." They left the garden by the copper gate. A boy carrying a stack of folded cloths nearly ran into them and then did the worst thing a messenger can do in a house like this. He widened his eyes and learned a new story too quickly. He scuttled off with the certainty he would be the first to tell it. Mara watched from the bend where light did not reach. She did not step out. She did not cough to announce herself. She turned and walked the other direction with the quiet of a person carrying a knife in her mind. Halfway up the stair, Cale appeared with his arm wrapped clean and his mouth set in a line that meant he had been trying not to say something and had failed in the attempt. "Lady?" he said, and then glanced at Anthony the way a soldier looks at a river he might be asked to ford in winter. "The hall is smaller than it looks." He tipped his chin toward the corridor Seraphina had left. "The Alpha will hear where your feet have been." "Thank you," she said, and meant it. Theon found her before she reached the private wing. He did not shout. He did not throw the door open to make a spectacle of authority. He stood very still in the center of the passage and let space do its work. Arendor was behind him with the kind of face men grow when they are ready to turn fights into instruction. Calith was there too, one hand on the railing as if she had paused in the exact right place by accident. Mara arrived with 2 elders. The word silence braided into her bones. Anthony stopped a respectful distance away the way men do in other men's houses when the next moments decide whether anyone bleeds. "Where," Theon asked, "did you just come from?" Seraphina kept her hands at her sides and her voice steady. "From a place with wind. With someone who thinks I am not furniture." "It was not wise," Arendor said softly. "It was not quite a rebuke. Theon's eyes were gray iron under winter. His voice did not rise. He stepped into her space, and when she did not step back, he came closer. His palm found the line of her throat and held there with the care of a man checking a horse's pulse to see whether fear had gone to poison. "You belong to me," he said, low, even. Each word placed where it would stay. The heat under the mark surged so hard she bit back a sound. Her body answered out of old instinct and new compulsion. Under her ribs, the sleeping thing rose and turned angrily against the press. Not awake. Not yet. But no longer indifferent. Cale pushed delighted hunger into Theon's mind. Now. Show the other male what chain he cannot cut. Cyrus bared his teeth in Anthony's. He harms her, we do not leave. The hall saw none of that. It saw a woman go still and a man not move and power settle into the space like weight. Arendor's fingers flexed once and then flattened. Calith's little smile grew complicated. Maira's eyes burned and did not blink. Serenia spoke carefully to keep her voice from unraveling. "I am not a thing," she said. "Say it with me." He stared down into her, and the part of him that had learned to choose control even when his wolf-ordered ruin did what it had been trained to do. He loosened his hand and let the heat feel like mercy instead of shackle. "You are not a thing," he said. "Say the second part," she said. He held her eyes. "You are mine," he said, and made it a sentence, not a snare. She exhaled once through her nose, fury and confusion and something she could not name fighting over air. The hall had turned so quiet she could hear the little sound the lamps make when they burn down. Anthony took one step forward and Arendor took one to meet him, and the balance held on a fine, sharp edge. Calith watched like a woman who had finally bought a ticket to her favorite play. Maira raised one hand and the elders under her command remembered how to be still. Theon lifted his palm from Serenia's throat as if removing a coin from an altar. "If you wish to breathe, you come with me," he said quietly. "If you wish to perform, keep walking in other men's corridors." "I wish to breathe," she said. "Good," he said and turned. Arendor moved with them. Calith's gaze slid to Anthony and away. Maira watched until they turned a corner and then looked down at her own hands as if counting bones. Serenia did not look back. The bond dragged at her like a tide that had chosen a direction. Anthony did not follow. The line the wolves had been sharpening between them thrummed like a bowstring, and then went quiet, not slack, waiting. In the chamber, Theon closed the door without making it a sound to be remembered. He stood for a heartbeat with his palms flat against the wood, as if asking it to steady him. Then he turned, and everything in his face that he would never show in the hall was there, raw and controlled by layers. "You will not walk with him," he said. "You will not pin me to your maps," she said. Cale prowled, amused and insistent. "Bite her and be done with this talk." "Not like this," Theon told him. "Not like this," Serenia echoed before she could stop herself, and the words shocked them both enough to make a silence neither of them knew how to fill. Outside, the mountain breathed, the lamps ticked. Somewhere down the hall, a guard shifted his weight and swallowed. The hour changed. Theon's jaw set. He stepped closer, in a way that said tonight he would not ask a third time. "Come to the ledge," he said, "then we will talk." "About what?" she asked. "About punishment," he said, "and about whether it has another name when it has a purpose." Night gathered along the stone like water finding old channels. Theon waited at the door with one palm against the frame, the posture of a man who had decided the next hour for both of them. "Come," he said. They climbed a narrow stair that angled up through the mountain and arrived at the high ledge. Wind pressed in thin threads. The wards hummed above the cut in the rock, a high silver note that seemed to balance on the bones of the cliff. The valley lay dark in folds, the forest beyond a deeper seam. "Stand there," Theon said, turning her to face the opening. He stepped behind her, close enough that the heat from his body found her back through the fabric. She felt the bond take notice of the position, as if even the air could read intention. You walked with him, he said. I walked beside him, she said. The difference is not academic. Tell me why. Because he asked. And because I am tired of being a blade left where men decide to set me. Kale pushed forward in Theon's skull, voice deep and pleased. She lifts her head to our teeth. Claim her and burn the scent of the other off her skin. Not yet, Theon told him, though the refusal had rough edges. He set his hands on either side of Seraphina against the stone, bracketing her without touching. When he spoke, his mouth was close to her ear. The wards heard you today? He said. The elders did too. You do not get to walk around this hall like a spark in soft cloth. You will not be alone with him again. You do not get to command breath, she said. I command what keeps my people alive, he said, and tonight that includes the shape of your steps. She turned to face him. The wind caught her braid and moved it between them like a living thing. What is my punishment? She asked, voice low, steady. You use that word. Use it again. His jaw went hard and then loosened. I will not put hands on you to satisfy jealousy, he said. That is not discipline. That is rot. You want my truth. Here. You will sleep in my rooms until I decide the hall has learned that you belong to me. You will wear my scent where they can smell it. You will train until your body knows how to make distance when you need it. And you will tell me when the wards sing too high, that is the purpose. The punishment is that I am choosing for you when you would rather knock down doors to choose yourself. Her throat worked. She reached for anger and found it hot and bright. You want obedience and call it protection. You want the right to say mine and not be questioned. He stepped closer by a breath. Say you are not a thing, he said. I am not a thing, she said. Say the second part. No, she said, and felt the small savage pleasure of it. He leaned down until his breath warmed the skin just below her ear. Then I will say it, and I will make it mean something that does not break you. You are mine, Seraphina. Not to cut into a shape I like. To keep breathing, to stand near and watch the stone decide what to do with your breath. She hated the shiver that moved under her skin. She hated more the ache that followed, the body answering the bond as if it had never learned any other language. Under her ribs, the sleeping thing rolled toward the heat and pressed there, not awake, not voicing, only insisting that it existed. He lifted one hand and let the backs of his fingers skim the line of her jaw. The touch sent heat through the bond like a fuse taking fire. Theon's scars hummed in answer, the ache that lived there quieting in a way that made him close his eyes for one heartbeat. He turned his forearm and brought the pale band softly to the edge of her palm. Do not be afraid of what you are, he said. Give me your hand. She stared at him and then put her hand to his skin. Heat rose in a slow, steady push, moved along the scar and back into her. The roughness eased a degree. The white shifted toward old ivory. Her breath hitched, she pulled away. Enough, she said. Agreed, he said, though his voice had gone lower. His control rang like metal struck and held. Kyle was a dark pressure behind his eyes, urging, amused, impatient. Now, the wolf said, put your mouth on the place you marked and remind her. Not like this, Theon said again. He raised his hand and set his fingers under her chin, gentler than anything else in his body. Look at me. She did, violet eyes wide in the low light. The world beyond the ledge waited, cold and quiet. The wards sang their thin note. If he calls you to the ravine ledge, Theon said, you will not go. She thought of Anthony's voice in the garden, the offer almost invisible under the warning. She felt the pull in her chest tilt toward the direction of that ledge as if a compass had just decided to be honest. The sleeping creature under her ribs turned once and set a paw down closer to the surface. Her mouth went dry. She made herself stand still inside all of it. I will not be taken, she said. Not by him. Not by you. If I walk, it will be because I choose a door. Good, he said. Choose this one. He brushed his thumb along the mark, a light stroke that made her knees threaten to unlock. The bond surged, hot, unkind, relentless. Mine, he said. softer than he had ever used the word. "Say it." "No," she said again, but the sound carried less air. He bent his head so his mouth was a breath from hers and stopped there because stopping was the only way he believed he would still recognize himself in the morning. "I will not force you," he said. "I will make it hard to want anyone else." That line should have made her cold. It made heat sit at the base of her throat and pulse. She tried to laugh and couldn't. "What do you call this, if not force?" "Discipline," he said, "and honesty. I am not gentle. I will not learn how to be to make you less afraid of me. I will learn how to be careful, so that when you choose me, it is not because I broke you into a shape that fits my hand." She hated how the words fit a place in her that was already empty and waiting. She hated more that the emptiness did not feel like loss when he looked at her like this, as if he were the first person who had ever decided to stand where it hurt and not step back. Boots rang faint from below, the sound of the watch turning. Arendor would be counting names. Somewhere Calith would be putting a story into a jar to open later. Mara would be writing lines in her mind and deciding which throat she would cut with love if the hall demanded it. Serenia felt all of it like weather at the edge of skin. Theon lowered his hand. "Come," he said. "You sleep in my rooms tonight, if I say no." "Then I carry you," he said. Not as a threat, but as a fact he was prepared to make true. "I would rather you walk." She walked. His chamber was larger than hers, not by much. A table with maps, a low couch, a bed built into the wall, like a promise. He closed the door and did not lock it. He took off his coat and folded it once. He did not undress farther. He did not take his eyes off her for long. "There," he said, indicating the bed, "I will take the couch." That surprised her. She stood beside the bed and did not sit. "You said punishment." "This is punishment," he said, "for both of us." He crossed to the table and set his hands on the map as if the lines were strong enough to lift. When he spoke again, his voice had pulled itself together. "You will not leave this room without me or Arendor, until I tell you the hall knows what I have decided it must know. In the morning, Bren will make you regret ever thinking you knew where your feet belonged. You will wear my mantle to the meal. You will eat and speak, and when someone calls you witch under their breath, you will decide whether to smile like a knife or cut like one. When the wards sing high, you will tell me without pretending you do not understand what that means." "You are asking for loyalty," she said. "I am demanding it," he said. "The asking comes later when I have earned the other thing I want." She pushed. "Which is you," he said simply. "And not because a curse made it easy to take you." Silence braided itself between them. He walked to the unlit window cut high in the wall and stood with his back to her, head bowed like a man who had discovered the single position that kept him from breaking. Across the hall in a guest room colder than it needed to be, Anthony stood at his own slit of dark and listened to Cyrus breathe inside him. "She chose him tonight," the wolf said. "She chose not to be taken," Anthony answered, forcing the words quiet. "There is a difference." "Not for long," Cyrus said. "The chain will teach her its song." Anthony rested his forehead to the stone. "We will not be the ones to break it," he said. "If she comes, we open the corridor. If she does not, we leave before we make every problem here worse than the curse." Cyrus did not answer with words. Hunger has other languages. Back in Theon's chamber, Serenia set her palm lightly to the coverlet, as if heat might tell her something about the choice she was making by lying down in another man's bed. It was ordinary, warmed by the air. Nothing like the mark that had decided to become its own weather inside her. She turned back to Theon. "Say it again," she said. He looked over, wary. "Which part?" "The part where I am not a thing." "You are not a thing," he said at once. The words held. Then he added, unsmiling, "I will repeat it until your bones know it without you reminding me." She sat, then lay on her side, body stiff with the kind of fatigue that arrives when anger and fear agree to stop arguing for an hour. Theon doused the lamp until only a low ember glowed in the brazier. He took the couch and stretched out on it like a man refusing comfort. "You are leaving the door unlocked," she said into the near dark. I am leaving it closed, he said. If you open it, I will wake. If you run, I will catch you. If you fight, I will enjoy it and still win. Sleep. She let a breath out through her nose, almost a laugh. Do you ever try to be less yourself? I fail, he said. Sleep. Silence settled. Stone breathed. The ward line above the ledge kept its high thread, softer now in her ears because the mountain had decided to put most sounds away. She shut her eyes and felt the heat at the mark like a second heartbeat. Her wolf moved and it did not fully wake. It did not flutter with words or take her hands. It came closer than it ever had, a slow body sliding up through deep water until it floated just beneath the surface of her mind. A pulse went out from it, small and shockingly tender. It brought with it a name that did not belong to the man on the couch. Anthony. The wolf breathed, not a voice so much as a shaping of breath inside her, and the shock of it made her eyes open to darkness that felt suddenly too small. She reached for the mark without thinking and pressed her fingers there as if she could muffle what the body had decided to say. Theon's breathing changed a fraction on the couch, the sense of a man who could wake from the middle of sleep and be on his feet before the blanket finished falling. He did not move. He let her have the sound of him not moving. She said nothing. The name she hadn't chosen sat in her chest like a live coal. The bond pulled hard toward the man across the room in another direction entirely toward the ledge that faced the ravine. She did not know which ache was worse. She did not know which one would break her sooner. Outside, a thin draft rode a path along the floor and rose to the bed. She breathed it in until it cooled the place under the mark. After a long time, the heat settled into something she could bear. Her wolf drifted back a little, not away, not asleep, only waiting. On the couch, Theon lay with his eyes open to the dark he had chosen for his life. Cale was quiet for once, not because want had gone, but because something older than want had taken its place. The knowledge that a single hour could decide the shape of a year. He closed his eyes and kept his body still. He did not reach for her. He did not sleep. When dawn would have come in other places, the mountain only breathed differently. Seraphina stared at the shadowed ceiling and knew the next day would count her steps and make a ledger of each. She rolled once, set her palm flat to the coverlet, and promised herself the same thing she had promised in another room under another roof. She would not be a blade left where men decided to set her. She would be the hand that chose where to place it. The ember in the brazier sighed and fell in on itself. Somewhere, very far under stone, water moved slow as thought. Above that, wards kept singing to themselves. Between them, a woman in an alpha's bed and an alpha on a couch lay awake and breathed the same air without admitting to it. The future stood at the door, unlocked and closed. Dawn came to the mountain the way it always did here, without light. It arrived as a change in breath and a softer hum in the wards, as if the stone decided to loosen its hold for an hour and see who deserved to stand. Theon was already awake. He lay on the couch, because he had said he would, and because he kept the kinds of promises that made men either respect him or fear him. His eyes were on the woman in his bed. The covers rose and fell the smallest measure with Seraphina's breathing. Even in sleep, she looked like someone refusing to be turned into a softer version of herself for anyone's comfort. The mark at her throat glowed faintly, catching the ember from the brazier. "Claim her," Cale said inside him, voice low and certain. "The night has finished talking. She is ours." Theon didn't answer at once. He studied the pale line of her jaw, the silver blonde strands that had escaped the braid. He had touched her there last night and stopped, because stopping had been the only way he recognized the man he still wanted to be in the morning. The want hadn't lessened for the choice. It stood in his chest like a second pulse. She stirred, not fully waking. The bond moved under his skin in response, warm and wrong and right all at once, as relentless as tide. He sat up, set his feet to the floor, and rolled his shoulders like a man remembering he owned them. "You make patience sound like weakness," he said to the wolf. "It isn't." "Patience is what prey thinks it has," Cale answered. "She is not prey. Neither are you." Take what is ours and teach the hall its story." He let the growl slide past without biting. His hand brushed the map rolled out on the table, the inked lines of tunnels and vents and warded ledges. He had walked all of it until the mountain knew his name better than he did. The map gave him nothing that mattered in this room. Serenya's eyes opened. Violet met gray across the thin distance. Theon watched the way awareness rose in her, the flash of wariness first, then the quick check of the room, then the heat at her throat answering him, because the bond did not ask for permission. "How long have you been staring at me?" she said, voice roughened by sleep. "Long enough to count your breaths and wonder what you'd do if I touched you," he said. He did not change his tone. Honesty sounded like a blade kept clean, and he was running out of other languages. She pushed herself up on one elbow. The pale light of the brazier caught in her hair and turned it into a quiet flame. Her eyes told him she didn't know whether to be angry or something else. Her wolf moved under her skin like a body turning in warm water. "Don't," she said softly, and he didn't pretend not to know what she meant. He stood the couch whispering as he left it. "We have a day to get through," he said. "There will be mouths and opinions, and men who think they deserve to be the center of every story. Eat. Then we walk." "Guarded," she said, and the word felt like stone on her tongue. "Protected," he corrected. "Prisoners are protected too," she said. The corner of his mouth moved. "I am trying to keep my hall from testing exactly how much you can do before I learn what happens after. That requires you to stay under my eyes. It requires me to be brave in corridors that aren't yours," she said. Her chin lifted one notch. "You taught me to stand. Do not ask me to sit now." Kale pushed a pleased rumble through his bones. "She knows how to talk to our teeth," the wolf said. "Take her mouth and she will stop pretending to be unsure." Theon ignored him. He crossed the space and offered Serenya a cup from the table. Steam rose from it. Her fingers touched the rim of his hand, and the bond pulsed, a simple heat that made the scar bands along his forearms ache and quiet in the same breath. He saw her notice the change. He let her. Arendor knocked once and came in on Theon's word. He took in the room, the couch, the bed, and both of their faces with a single look that didn't waste time pretending to be casual. "Scouts," Arendor said. "The king approaches, not a host, 3 riders. He asked for stone and was told we have all they could want." "Anthony," Serenya said, as if admitting something to herself and to the air. Theon felt Kale's head lift and turn at the name. "Rival," the wolf said. "He's come to cut a cent off what he wants." Theon set the cup down and reached for his coat because rituals had their place, even when you were deciding which kind of trouble to let through your door. He met Serenya's eyes. "You will stay in this room," he said. "No," she said. He waited. He had learned that being silent made men show their bellies first. "I will not be the subject of an argument while I sit behind a door like a child waiting to be told what the weather is," she said. "I am the storm in this story. If the hall is going to watch me, I will decide what I give them to look at." Arendor's mouth did something that was not disrespectful and not quite approval. Theon watched the heat at Serenya's throat, as if it could give him tactical information he could profit from. "You will walk with me," he said, "and you will stand where I tell you to stand. If you leave my reach, I will carry you back." "You could try?" she said. "I would enjoy trying," he said, and Kale chuckled in his head, delighted. She slid off the bed, feet finding the floor. She did not reach for the cloak he held out. He set it across her shoulders anyway, and when his fingers brushed the line of her collarbone, the bond leapt so hard it put grief and want on the same note. He almost said something he might have liked and would not have forgiven himself for. He didn't. They stepped into the corridor. The private wing breathed them out into the broader halls, where voices had already started to collect in corners and along railings. Calith stood at the bend like she had been pulled there by a string. Her red dress made the lamps look more intentional. "Good morning, Luna," Calith said in a voice that managed to be both polite and mischievous. Serenya didn't rise. Not yet, she said. Do not put a crown on me I didn't say yes to. It is a headband, Calith said. It keeps hair out of your eyes when men start swinging their egos. She fell in at a distance that meant she could overhear, without committing to involvement. Mara met them at the mouth of the great hall, hands clasped, chin tipped the mildest degree. She studied Seraphina with a physician's eye and a grandmother's severity. You slept, Mara said. I practiced, Seraphina said, for today. Good, Mara said. Remember that breath is a choice. Then she flicked a glance at Theon that said she approved of nothing and everything he was about to do. The great hall filled in layers like water finding its level. Elders on the benches, warriors along the walls, young ones trying to be invisible and failing. Kyle stood near the left pillar, his wrapped arm easy now. His gaze steady on Seraphina, the way a man looks at the person he owes something to and has not yet decided how to repay. Arendor moved to the spot where he could see every door and the faces at both ends of the table. Theon took the head because if he didn't, the space would have made a mistake and given it to someone else. He felt the hall's attention gather, as if it were a physical thing you could pick up and put somewhere. He put it on himself until men remembered how to breathe. Anthony entered without flourish. The stone did the work for him. Sun-burnished skin and dark hair tied back loosely. The gold of his eyes caught the lamplight and gave it back in a way that made men resent it or admire it depending on their blood. He stood just beyond the threshold as if asking permission he had never asked for in any room before. Cyrus paced behind his gaze, calm and alert. He smells like daylight that forgot it kills, Cale said, prowling. Break him on our floor. Anthony's glance went to Theon first because that was the ritual of war. Then to Arendor, because wise men count the hands that carry the weight. Then to Maera, because elders often have sharper teeth than the men who pretend to lead them. Finally, Anthony looked at Seraphina. The pause that followed was not long. It was long enough. Lady Seraphina, Anthony said. He didn't bow. He made the name into respect instead. Anthony, she returned. Cyrus slid forward with a patient hunger. Her pulse, the wolf said inside the king. Hear how it changes when we stand this close. We are not thieves, Anthony answered, and found the words did not come with comfort. Theon's hand hovered near Serena's wrist without touching it. The hall saw it and learned another rule they would pretend they had always known. You asked for stone, Theon said. You have it. Speak quickly. Men bleed if we stand too long pretending to like each other. I did not come to like you, Anthony said, voice even. I came to end something that should never have been tied the way it was. Calith smiled into her hand. Mara's eyes sharpened. Arendor went very still. Anthony's attention stayed on Seraphina now, and if anyone thought that was insult, they weren't paying attention. He addressed her like he would a sovereign with the power to turn a bloody day into a clean one without drawing a blade. You feel it, he said. The pull. The way the bond drags you toward what is wrong for you. Serena's body tightened, the mark warming under her fingers where she had unconsciously lifted a hand to it. Her wolf rose closer, awake in fragments, a low sound like acceptance and refusal at once. Say it plain, Theon said, ice in the words. The girl is not your mate, Anthony said. She is mine. No one moved, but the air found a new temperature. The benches absorbed a ripple of sound that wasn't speech. Cale's jaw set. Calith's eyes flared with interest that had more to do with the hall's favorite theater than with either man. Mara didn't blink. Arendor's attention cut to the king's hands to be sure they weren't moving. Theon's chest lifted once. Cale rumbled, dark and delighted. At last, the wolf said, a body to break. Seraphina stepped forward a half pace before Theon could decide whether he would put a hand on her and make it into the wrong kind of moment. She didn't look at him to ask permission. She didn't look at Anthony to offer him victory with her eyes. If I am a question to be answered by two men, she said, then every word either of you says will be a mistake. Anthony's mouth tilted, not amused and not chastened. He lifted both hands a fraction, as if offering to put them behind his back if that would keep the room alive. "I came to ask you to choose," he said. "You came to ask me to give you something you believe is yours," she said, and her voice did not shake. The mark at her throat throbbed with heat, and under it something older than heat learned how to stretch. "If there is a bond between us, I feel the threat of it. I am not blind, but I am not a rope either. Listen carefully, all of you." She turned, making the hall into her audience because it had already decided to be. "I am done being traded, named, claimed, held up like an answer to someone else's problem. I will choose where I stand and whose hand I take, and I will choose it for myself, not because a curse says it will make the numbers add up." Cale went quiet. Theon heard that silence the way you hear a bow being drawn smoothly across a string. Anthony's gaze didn't waver, but Cyrus moved close with a sharp stillness that was more dangerous than growling. Mara's chin tipped in a precise degree of approval. Arendor's eyelids half lowered, the look he wore when pain was coming, and he intended to let it teach before he removed it. Calith's smile turned thoughtful in a way that meant she would repeat this later and enjoy the sound of it. The wards hummed high above them, so faint only those already listening heard. The sound made Serenya's skin rise. In her chest, the sleeping creature that had spent so long underwater came closer to the surface and set its weight on the body she lived in. A whisper brushed the inside of her mouth, not language, and somehow perfectly clear. "Mine," it breathed, and it wasn't a person she had in mind when the word shaped itself. It was a choice. Theon's voice dropped without losing its edge. "Say it then," he said. "Say it so the hall can carry the sound into the tunnels and remember exactly what it heard." Anthony took one step forward because not moving would have been a different kind of lie. His hands were empty. His eyes were fire held in a vessel that had been taught not to spill. Cyrus slid along his bones, cool and certain. "If she names him, we leave. If she names us, we take her and do not look back." "I won't be a thief," Anthony told him, and Cyrus made a small sound that might have been respect and might have been hunger going to sleep so it could wake sharper. Serenya looked at both men and then at the hall that had learned her face in a handful of days and would be telling stories about it for years. She stepped another pace forward out of Theon's shadow and did not step into Anthony's. Heat surged under her skin, a painful brightness that made the world stand up. "I choose," she said, and the words fell into the stone like seeds. 100 breaths held at once. Her wolf leaned into her bones, ready to speak, in full for the first time. Ready to tear something if the answer came out wrong. The hum in the wards climbed another note and held. "I choose myself," she said, and the hall whispered because it had not understood that was an option. She lifted her chin and added, without looking at Theon and without looking at Anthony, "I choose to end the thing that uses me to bind you." Her wolf surged. Kyle's answering growl rolled low and approving in Theon's mind before the Alpha could decide what he himself felt. Cyrus stilled, the hunting silence that means a strike is coming or has been avoided emerging and holding. The lights burned steady. The stone listened harder. Theon's hand hovered the smallest space from her wrist and did not close. The first crack didn't sound like breaking. It sounded like pressure deciding to become breath. The air in the great hall changed temperature, a degree warmer, as if the mountain exhaled. Serenya's mark flared hot, and then went shock cold. She pressed her fingers there on instinct and felt the thread that had been tugging her toward the wrong door snap inside her like a cord cut clean. Anthony's head turned in a small motion as if he had heard the same thing break and had to check with his body which part of him had been holding it. His face did not change. His eyes did. Theon's breath left his chest once hard. Cale pressed up jubilant and dangerous, a wolf scenting snow finally giving way to rain. The ward note above them flickered, wavered, then steadied at a lower pitch that made the lamps look suddenly brighter. A hush moved through the benches, not reverence exactly, but the relief people feel when a weight they had carried so long they forgot about it finally goes. Serenya's wolf rose to the edge of speech and then paused there, as if asking her permission. Theon's fingers found her wrist. He didn't squeeze, he didn't pull. He simply set his skin to hers, so that when the next moment came, neither of them would be standing in it alone. She let him. For the first time since she had set foot in the Ashen Wolves' Hall, she let him. Anthony watched and did not move. Rent open not by loss, but by the kind of understanding that comes too late to be useful. Cyrus breathed once like a creature in pain, and then went quiet. Theon opened his mouth to say something that the hall should not hear, and then shut it, because saying it now would make it a spectacle when it needed to be a promise. Say the rest, Mara said from the benches, voice steady, steel wrapped in cloth. End it where it began. Serenia looked at Theon fully then. The room around them blurred, not from magic, but from the way a difficult decision finally remembers it has a body to live in. The mark at her throat pulsed, not as a wound, not as a chain, but as heat that chose where to go. Her wolf leaned forward, waiting to see who they were going to be when they spoke as one. I choose you when you do not use me, she said, not loud and not uncertain. I choose you when you are careful. I do not choose a curse. I do not choose a chain. I choose a man who stands where it hurts and still holds the line. Theon closed his eyes like a man hearing the only music he had been trying not to need. Cale lifted his head and howled once in the place inside where wolves tell the truth to the bones they live in. Anthony lowered his gaze. He didn't bow, he didn't argue. He just stood there and let grief be something clean. We will need a moment, Theon said to the hall, voice hoarse for the first time anyone could remember. If any of you try to turn this into a song before I am finished with it, I will teach you the quiet again. Arendor moved like a door being closed. Calith's mouth relaxed into something that was not defeat and not victory. Cale rubbed his wrapped forearm with 2 fingers and smiled to himself, small and honest. Anthony turned to go. Cyrus's thought touched the inside of his chest, cool and precise. We leave with our teeth clean. There will be other winters. Anthony glanced back once at Serenia. The unreadable look he gave her wasn't a plea and wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement from one sovereign to another. Then he walked out of the room that had just decided he was not its story. The hall began to breathe again. Theon's hand was still on Serenia's wrist. She didn't pull away. The wards hummed lower, content in a way stone can be when pressure discovers the language of release. Somewhere far under them, water moved through rock and learned a new path. Theon leaned close, mouth near her ear, speaking so quietly, only the mark and the bond could carry the words. Come with me, he said. Now, before anyone finds a way to make this theirs. She nodded once. The hall didn't stop them. It parted like a wound that had already decided to heal. Arendor fell in behind and then stopped himself with a small smile she didn't see. Mara lowered herself to the bench again and set her hands in her lap as if she were blessing a meal she hadn't prepared. Calith watched them go with eyes that promised more gossip than malice. The corridors back to Theon's rooms felt different. The lamps looked warmer. The air tasted less like old smoke and more like iron made clean by rain. Serenia's wolf moved just under her skin, a slow body that had finally decided to surface for air. Cale pressed up into Theon's mind, triumphant and tender in a way he rarely allowed himself. Ours, the wolf said. Not by bite, by choosing. Better. Theon didn't argue, he didn't slow. He reached his door, opened it, and let her walk in first because it was the only order that mattered anymore. The door closed behind them without a sound that the hall could keep. The room held its breath the way a body does before it decides whether to speak or run. Serenia stood just inside, hands at her sides, as if the decision she had made in the great hall still echoed, and she needed the stone to stop answering before she could hear herself think. Theon didn't touch her. He stepped past, turned the key in his chest that kept him from being unmade by want, and faced her with nothing between them but air. Say it to me, he said, without the hall, without anyone to make it a story. Tell me why. Because I was done being used, she said. Because I am tired of being a rope between two men who both think the knot is the point. Because I wanted to stop being a thing that explains other people's choices. Her breath hitched. She made it steady. And because when you said you would not break me into a shape, I believed you. I hate that I did. I hate it less than the alternative. Cale pushed into Theon's mind with a rough contentment that sounded like a big animal settling onto warm stone. She chose our mouth, the wolf said. Not because we dragged her, because she remembered the taste. Theon let the thought sit in him without answering it. When he spoke, his voice came out lower than the hall had heard. In there, I wanted you to choose me, he said. Not the power, not the end of the curse. Me. If you had chosen him, I would have taken men into the tunnels and bled out my want where it couldn't hurt you. I don't know if I would have survived it. I would have done it anyway. Her fingers flexed. She looked down at them, then back at him. I am afraid, she said. Not of you, of what this turns me into. Of waking up and realizing I let myself belong to someone who will walk me to the edge of what I am and tell me to jump because it helps him sleep at night. I don't sleep, Theon said simply. Not until the numbers are different in a way I can live with. He took a step closer. I can be careful. I will never be gentle. I won't learn to lie about what I am to make this easier. But I will not make you smaller to fit me. I will make room. Her wolf shifted under her skin, a warm weight rolling toward the surface, testing how the air felt on the half of it that had never been allowed to breathe. It carried a surge that felt like both warning and permission. The pulse of it went through her and into the space between them the way heat leaves skin. He felt it. He lifted a hand and stopped half a breath from her jaw. May I? She held still long enough to decide she wasn't surrendering. Then she nodded once. His knuckles brushed along the line of her face with a care that had nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with the hard-won discipline of a man who had taught himself to not take what he wanted until wanting had earned a name in the other person's mouth. Heat leapt along the bond, quick and sure. The pale bands on his forearms hummed, pain easing like a door that had been leaning on itself too long and finally decided to swing. Her eyes dropped to the scars. Her palm rose without her asking it to, as if the sleeping part of her had taken her hand and lifted it. She set her fingers lightly to one of the old burns. The change was small and real. It always startled her the way the roughness softened under her touch, the white learning the color of ivory, the ache under his skin turning obedient for a moment. He exhaled like a man who had forgotten a pain until the absence reminded him how often it had been there. Don't mistake me for a cure, she said, breath even, voice not. I don't, he said. I mistake you for a person I don't want to live without. Cale's laugh was soft and pleased, a rare sound that didn't bare teeth. Claim her, the wolf urged. Not like hunger, like rain. Serenya's hand slid higher, to another band. Her wolf rolled again, closer now, the surface of her mind stretching around it the way water adjusts to a new body. The warmth that traveled from her palm into him and back into her made her feel steady and unsteady at once. She lifted her other hand to his shoulder and found iron under cloth, heat under iron, restraint under heat. Theon cupped her jaw, thumb brushing the edge of the mark he'd put there. If I have to ask again, I will, but I am going to keep asking until the answer is the same in your mouth and in your body. Do you want me? Yes, she said, and the honesty opened something that had been clenched inside her for so long she had forgotten it had hands. He moved in slowly as if the room could count every inch. His mouth found hers with a patience he didn't know he possessed. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't rough. It was a claim offered, not taken. Her fingers tightened in his shirt, pulling him to her in a reflex that made less sense the more sense it made. Heat climbed and settled. Breath changed shape. The kiss turned from question to answer to the kind of language people who have run out of words use when they still need to be understood. He kept it slow when his body wanted speed, careful when his wolf wanted certainty. honest when the past inside him wanted to make all new things into old mistakes. Her wolf rose into her throat and pressed a sound there, not words, a primitive music that made her knees soften. She broke the kiss long enough to speak. "I will not be owned," she said. "Then don't be," he said, forehead resting against hers. "Be equal to whatever this is and make me rise to it. Tell me no when I try to make you smaller. Tell me no when I try to make us easier to stomach. Tell me yes when I finally deserve it." She laughed once, breathless and true. "You are very bad at not asking for too much." "I am very good at asking for exactly what I want," he said. "Say yes." She slid her hands to his face and lifted his mouth back to hers. "Yes," she said against him. "Yes." He answered with his whole body. His hands found her waist and learned it, the line of her spine, the way she arched into touch that didn't mistake pressure for proof. He loosened the clasp of her mantle and let it fall with a hush. His lips trailed from her mouth to her jaw, to the place just below her ear where the bond reacted as if a struck match had been held to it and a fuse had chosen to take fire. Kale rumbled, a low, approving thunder. "Our Luna," the wolf said, and there was pride in it that had nothing to do with possession. Her wolf answered him, not his speech but his presence, a pulse of pleased agreement that threaded itself through Theon's bones. He stiffened a little with shock at the intimacy of it, then adjusted, letting the sensation settle into a place inside him that would always be hers. They moved together without hurry, the way people move when they understand that rushing would cost them more than it would give. She explored the pale scars along his forearms, the strong lines of his back, the plane of his chest. He traced the curve of her shoulder with the backs of his fingers, mapped the heat along her ribs with his palm, learned the small, involuntary sound she made when his mouth found the hollow at the base of her throat. Words came between them not as interruptions but as anchors. "Tell me when to stop," he said. "I will," she said. "Tell me if I take too much." "And you will not," she said. "And if I do, pull me back." He smiled against her skin, not handsome, not practiced, just sudden and real. Then he kissed the mark he had given her, as if apologizing and promising in the same breath. The bond leapt hard enough to throw a bright pain through both of them, shock giving way to heat that didn't waver. Clothes loosened because they chose to loosen them, not because a hurry made clumsy work of it. Skin found skin. The room changed, the air growing warm, breathing with them. The brazier glowed steady, copper light painting their shoulders and the line of his throat and the soft curve of her hip. He lifted her and set her down where the bed made sense. She took his wrist and brought it to her mouth, teeth grazing the smooth edge of a scar he had carried into every night of his life. He shivered, not from pain. Kale prowled the edge of Theon's will, urging faster, fiercer. Theon pushed him back with a growl that didn't need a throat to make a sound. "We are not animals now," he told the wolf, and Kale, surprised and pleased, answered with an assent that felt like the thump of a great tail against a stone floor. Serena's wolf rose fully into her eyes for an instant, violet deepening, pupils wide. It placed something soft and inevitable into her mouth, a whisper that was more instruction than word. "Closer." She pulled Theon down and he went willingly. The kiss turned darker, hunger gaining confidence. Her hands learned his back with the kind of attention you give to maps you expect to need in a storm. His hands framed her face, then slid reverent along the line of her throat and lower, pausing when promises needed to be spoken again and were. "Yes," she breathed, and he moved. The world narrowed to warmth and pressure, and the delicate discipline of two people deciding to be honest with their bodies as well as their mouths. Heat built. The bond braided tighter, not like a chain, but like two strands learning how to hold together without strangling what they held. Beyond the door, the mountain kept its own time. Somewhere a guard shifted and yawned. Somewhere a drop of water found a new path through rock. In this room, their breath became the only measure that mattered. He murmured her name when he could still say it. She said his without apology. Wolves rolled under their skin, not demanding, approving. When release came, it was not loud. It was quiet and deep and wholly theirs. A shudder and a gasp and a long, shaking breath that didn't belong to either of them alone. After, he didn't move away. He lay with his ear to her breath as if listening for a change in weather. He pressed his mouth to her hair, the small, absent-minded reverence of a man who had fought hard not to spill tenderness and discovered it might not be a weakness after all. The wards outside changed pitch again, so subtle only the people who'd been listening all their lives would hear it. Theon lifted his head, alert. Serenya's wolf stirred, then settled, answering the sound with a lazy push of presence that felt like contentment learning how to be bold. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. "Yes," he said, "the stone is remembering how to be less cruel." She smiled into his chest, a smile he could feel and not see. He traced a finger along the curve of it, then along her jaw, thumb pausing where he had cupped it first. He looked down into her face as if trying to memorize the exact way it softened when she let herself be unguarded. "Say it again," she said. "You are not a thing," he said at once. "The other part." He hesitated for a breath, not because he didn't know it, but because he wanted to say it, without turning it into a claim that would ruin what they had just made. "You are mine," he said quietly. "Not as a possession. As a person I answer to." Her throat worked, and the answer came easier than she had feared. "I am yours," she said. "Not as a chain. By choice." Kale howled once, not with sound, with certainty. Her wolf answered with a rumble that lived in both of them now, a shared recognition that crossed whatever distance had once existed between two separate bodies and turned it into a room with one bed. He rolled to his back and pulled her with him so she lay over his heart. She could feel it slow, then quicken, then slow again, as if the organ itself had been persuaded to learn a new language and was enjoying the lesson. His hand stroked down the braid, untying the end and letting silver strands spill into his palm. He set his mouth to her temple. The words came out before he could decide whether saying them was wise. "Stay." "I'm here," she said. "Tomorrow," he said. "And the next until the pack stops using witch like a knife and starts using Luna like a vow. Stay." A beat of silence where the old fear rose, looked around, couldn't find a hook to hang itself on, and left. "I'll stay," she said. "Don't make it a cage." "I won't," he said. "If I try, break it and use the pieces to cut me." She huffed a small laugh, incredulous and delighted in equal parts. "That is the most alpha vow I've ever heard." "It's the only one that makes sense," he said. She lifted up on one elbow and studied his face with the kind of attention that made men nervous. The scars at his forearms looked less angry. She ran a thumb along the nearest, thoughtful. "Does it still hurt?" "Less," he said. "Today more than yesterday and less than any day I can remember." "Good," she murmured. Then her mouth was on his again, slow and grateful. The ember in the brazier found new fire. The night, or what passed for it in the mountain, wore down its edge. A soft knock came at the door. Theon didn't move. Serenya went still but didn't reach for distance the way she would have a day ago. "What?" Theon called, voice level. "Erendor," came the reply. "The ward runners report the east line is held steady 2 hours. The humming dropped to normal pitch. Also, the king has left without asking us to watch him do it." "Thank you," Theon said. There was a beat. Then very dryly Erendor added, "And the hall is pretending not to talk about what it already heard. You have perhaps a watchful hour before someone decides to sing." Theon's mouth turned. "We'll use it." "I assumed," Erendor said, and his steps went away down the corridor like a man who enjoyed knowing things he would never say out loud. Serenya didn't move. She traced idle patterns on Theon's chest, feeling the thrum under her finger. He covered her hand with his. "They will come for you tomorrow with gifts and knives," he said. "Mara with the gifts, Calith with the knives wrapped in ribbon. Erendor will pretend to be bored and will count how many times you smile like a knife. Kale will find a reason to thank you in private. The boys in the lower yard will try to make you laugh because they've decided you're not a ghost after all." "And you," she said, "what will you do?" "I will stand beside you," he said. And if any man tries to use your name as a floor to step on, I will take his feet from him and give them back when he learns better balance." She kissed the place under his jaw the way a promise kisses a threshold. "I would like to see that." "You will," he said, and turned his head so that he could kiss her mouth again. Softer now. Less heat, and more thank you. The brazier sighed and settled. The mountain breathed. In the hall beyond, someone sang a snatch of something and then stopped, remembering the Alpha's warning. The ward line above the ledge held at its steady low note. No longer frantic, no longer thin. The curse that had made every morning a negotiation with fear was gone. In its place, something else had taken root. A bond not made by force or bargain or terror, but by two stubborn people deciding that choosing each other was worth the risk of being known. Theon pulled the blanket up over her shoulders, and the weight of it felt like permission, not confinement. She tucked her feet against his leg, and fit there like he had been made to expect exactly this shape someday, and had lived like a man preparing for it without admitting why. "Sleep," he said. "You first," she murmured. He huffed a breath that might have been a laugh and might have been victory. His hand moved slow down her back. She let her eyes close. Her wolf settled into the space behind her heart, awake enough to be a companion now, not a secret. It pressed once toward Cale across the bond, a wordless touch like two animals acknowledging shared ground. Cale answered with a low sound that wasn't a growl and wasn't a purr, something older than either. Seraphina drifted. Theon lay awake for a while and listened to the small sounds that meant everything, her breath changing, the steady hum of a ward that had decided it could stop being afraid, the quiet of his own body no longer arguing with light it could not bear. He was not a man who believed in luck, but he let himself believe, just for the length of a breath, in the miracle of being chosen by the person you would have become a villain to refuse. He slept then, the easy fall of a man who had fought the right war for once, and the mountain did what mountains do when people stop shouting at them and start listening. It held. They woke to the mountain's quieter hum, the kind of calm that follows a storm you didn't know you were holding. Seraphina lay warm against Theon's shoulder, the blanket a steady weight, the bond a slow pulse instead of a choke. Her wolf rested near the surface, present without crowding, a low glow where fear used to live. "Ours," Cale said, lazy with satisfaction. "Equal, not leash." Seraphina felt her wolf answer with a pleased push, more touch than word. Theon felt it ripple through him. His hand traced the line of her spine, reverent, as if learning a song he meant to remember. "We have to stand up," she murmured. "We will," he said. "After one more minute where we pretend the hall doesn't exist." He got a minute. Then Arendor's knock came, measured and patient. "Report," Theon called, not moving his arm from around her. "East lines hold. The hum steady." "The hall is pretending not to gather," Arendor said through the door, "which means they're already there. Elder Mara requests your presence, and by requests I mean, she told me to use that word." "We're coming," Theon said. He looked down at Seraphina. "Ready?" "No," she said, and swung her feet to the floor anyway. They dressed without ceremony and with unguarded glances that said more than any vow. Theon reached for his mantle, then set it over her shoulders instead. She didn't argue. He touched her jaw, brief and steady, and the bond warmed like breath on glass. The corridor held watchful silence. Cale waited at the bend, his arm unwrapped at last, the skin pink and smooth where rage had been. He lifted it a little, wordless thanks. Seraphina smiled, soft and real, and something eased in his face, like a man who had decided to live another winter. Myra met them at the great hall doors, hands folded, eyes bright as if she had slept with them open. "You did not break my hall last night," she said to Seraphina. "You unbent it. It complains less this morning." "Complaining is the pack's love language," Theon said dryly. "So is survival," Myra said. "Do not confuse them." Inside, the room rose to attention without standing. Elders on benches, warriors leaning against stone, the hush of a people waiting to be told how to feel. Calith appeared near the front as if the floor had decided to display her. She wore gray instead of red, which only made the cut of her mouth sharper. "Luna," Calith said lightly, testing the word. "I don't need a crown to do the work," Serenia answered. "But if you insist on a title, it should count for more than gossip." "It already does," Calith said, smiling with knives tucked neatly under the curve. Theon took the head of the hall because it would have been an error to sit anywhere else. He didn't speak until the room settled into one breath. When he did, his voice carried like iron laid across a doorway. "Our curse is broken," he said, "not by a king's promise or an elder's prayer. By a choice that cut a rope none of us should have tied. The wards will still hum. We will still bleed if we are foolish in the sun. But the weight that pressed this mountain into our bones is gone. We do not kneel to fear this morning. We walk." A low sound moved the length of the hall, part relief, part uncertainty. Men who had built identities from suffering searched for new muscles to flex. Arendor's arms folded, and the room remembered discipline. Theon turned, left space at his side where a different alpha might have kept it for power. Serenia stepped into it. The hush grew attentive. "You called me witch, some of you," she said. "You whispered it because you were afraid and because you liked the shape of the word in your mouths. Keep your fear. It can be useful. Lose the whisper. If you have something to say to me, say it where I can answer." Cale barked a short laugh, honest and surprised. Calith's head tipped in that small measure of respect she handed out like rare coins. Myra's stern mouth almost smiled. Serenia looked to the lower benches where the younger wolves stood too straight to be comfortable. "I will not heal you because you want to test miracles. I will train with you because I want you alive. If you are careless with your lives, I will be cruel with my patience. If you are brave, I will remember." A runner slipped in at the side door with a folded strip of leather sealed with wax. He hovered until Arendor beckoned. Theon broke the seal and scanned the neat lines. His jaw eased. "From the king," he said, lifting his gaze to Serenia. "He leaves the southern road and does not return without invitation. He sends respect to a woman who ended a story with her own mouth. And he offers a ward engineer, if we want him." Calith's brows climbed. Myra's mouth made a that meant she would argue with the engineer for sport and end by adopting him. Serenia nodded once, absorbing the clean sadness in the letter without letting it muddy the room. "Tell him thank you," she said, "and tell him to send the engineer if he can live on stone without complaining." "We will," Theon said. Myra's gaze narrowed. "One more thing. If anyone uses the word witch in a room I can hear, I will put them to work until their tongues learn silence. If they use it in a room I cannot hear, I will trust the Luna to make their mouths regret it." "Gladly," Serenia said, and the hall learned the taste of a new line. Theon lifted a hand, bringing the gathering to its last breath. "Our next work begins. We strengthen the wards with brains instead of fear. We train so our bodies stop thinking the sun is a god. We count with gratitude, not with curses. And we do not forget who gave this hall back to itself." He didn't look at Serenia when he said it. He didn't have to. The room did that for him. After the crowd broke into smaller knots of purpose, plans moved from mouths to hands. Arendor was already building lists out of thin air. Calith drifted to Serenia, like smoke looking for a window. "I will not make it easy for you," Calith said conversationally. "I will deliver knives wrapped in ribbon and expect you to understand the gift." "I don't mind knives," Serenia said. "I mind lies." "Then we will get along," Calith said, surprising them both a little. She lowered her voice. 3 elders will try to make theater out of your patience. I'll help you cut their stage ropes if you promise to let them fall without breaking their necks. We need their numbers even when we hate their voices." "Truce," Serenia said, and meant it. Cale approached with careful respect. "Lady," he said, "if you ever need a door guarded or a boy carried out of a tunnel he should not have entered, speak my name." "I will," she said. By afternoon, the private wing filled with the right kind of interruptions. A thin girl brought fresh bandages and stayed long enough to ask Serenia 3 questions and flee with a blush. An old warrior with white in his hair asked Theon if drills should shift now that the hum was lower, then ignored the answer and did what he intended anyway. Arendor returned twice, each time with a problem already solved and a third he wanted to fix before anyone else heard about it. Mara came with no guards and closed the door. "I am not given to tenderness," she said. "It makes men reckless. But I will say this. You did not save us from a curse so we could invent a new one out of your love. Keep your promises to each other and to this hall. I can protect you from elders and boys and even from your pride on a good day. I cannot protect you from lying to yourselves." "Understood," Theon said. "If we lie," Serenia said, "we will do it where you can see." "Good," Myra said, satisfied. "I prefer to witness my disappointments." She produced a small twist of woven wire from her sleeve, old and simple. "This belongs to women who mean what they say. Give it back if you decide to mean something else." Serenia took it, the metal warm from Myra's skin. "I don't plan to." "No one does," Myra said, eyes soft as knives. "Keep not planning." After Myra, Caliph again, slipping in with a ribboned parcel and a face that said she would laugh at herself later for what she was about to do. She unveiled a simple circlet of blackened steel, unadorned, clean. "If anyone insists on putting something on your head, let it be this," Caliph said. "It will not shine. It will not catch torchlight. It will not make a poet think of flowers. It will make him think of iron." Serenia weighed it. It felt like a fact. "Thank you," she said. "Do not thank me yet," Caliph said. "I expect favors for favors. But not today." Theon turned the circlet once, then set it on the table instead of on Serenia's head. "Not yet," he said. "You don't need it to be heard." "I don't," she agreed. "It will be useful when I'm tired." Arendor appeared again with that look that meant he had walked into their next thought. "If you're going to test the light, do it with witnesses," he said. They went to the high ledge. The wards hummed steady, a low sound like a choir remembering words. A sliver of daylight angled through the cut in the rock, a thin, honest bar of morning. Theon rolled his sleeve to the elbow and lifted his forearm into the light. Pain came like a spark, not a brand, a sting. The skin reddened and settled. A thread of smoke rose and died. Serenia set her palm over the pale band. Warmth moved and steadied, the ache obeying her as if taught. Arendor exhaled. "We still respect it," he said, "but we don't worship it anymore." "Good," Theon said, and his smile was quick and fierce, a rare thing that made him look younger and more dangerous at once. They stayed a while, saying little, watching wind right itself across the valley. When they turned, a boy waited at the bend with a satchel and too much seriousness for someone his size. From the south road, he said to Serenia, handing over a small carved token. "The king's mark. He asked me to speak the words, not only carry them." "Speak," she said gently. "Tell the Luna the world is wide, and a woman who chooses it is a thing kings should learn to respect," the boy recited, "and that he hopes stone is kinder to your feet than it was to his." Serenia closed her fingers over the token. "Thank you," she said. "Tell him our stone remembers he walked here without breaking anything." The boy grinned and ran, relieved to be a messenger for good news for once. Night settled. They returned to the ledge because endings deserve witness and beginnings deserve wind. The valley stretched dark and familiar. The wards thrummed low, content. The sliver of western light grazed Theon's skin and did not bite. He stood behind her the way he had and bracketed her against the world without caging her. Kyle pressed forward, curious and calm. Serenia's wolf rose happily into the touch, nosing the place where two lives learn to share a spine. "We won't always be gentle," he said into her hair. "We won't always be right." "No," she said, "but we will not be cowards." He smiled into the night, "and we will not be alone." They were quiet, listening to the sound of home breathing. Below, the pack moved through its first evening without the old weight. Men adjusting to lighter bones, women testing new angles on old arguments, children racing where they weren't supposed to and not being punished for it yet. Tomorrow, she said, we start teaching them to stop worshipping the sun and start respecting it. Tomorrow I learn all the names you promised me and decide who needs to be threatened and who needs to be fed. Tomorrow we train until fear becomes a tool, not a throne. And tonight, he said, what do we do? She leaned back into him, warmth meeting warmth. Tonight we stand at the edge of what tried to break us and refused to break. Tonight we breathe. He turned her gently and kissed her once, slow and certain, a seal on the day they had made. Their wolves pressed against the bond and hummed in shared contentment, two old forces agreeing to a truce that looked suspiciously like joy. When they left the ledge, the hall opened for them, not with bows or chants, with space, with men and women stepping aside because they had decided to make room for the two who had cut them free. Arendor nodded from the shadow of a pillar, a quiet acknowledgement that numbers were better tonight. Kale lifted his healed arm. Mara pretended not to watch and watched anyway. Kaleth's smile promised challenges as bright as they were dangerous. Back in their room, Theon shut the door and didn't lock it. Serenia set the black steel circlet beside Maera's woven wire charm on the table. Iron and love, knives and vows. She looked up at him and felt the steady pull of the bond. Not a chain, a choice. The curse was gone. Danger had not left, it had only changed its clothes. But they had made something that could stand inside it and not turn cruel. The mountain breathed, and for the first time, they breathed with it. Tomorrow, he said, and tomorrow, she answered, and meant forever.